Hello, Counselor Emerson. Oh, you're still connecting. Testing, Counselor Emerson. Can you hear us? It looks like you can hear us, but we can't hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay, sorry, everybody. In one moment here. Okay, I think this is where we were.
All right, apologize for technical difficulties. We're back. We left off with Stephen Miller giving us an update, or actually an overview of bylaw enforcement activities. Not even the activities, the process. Stephen, please proceed.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I was saying, bylaw enforcement officers help de-escalate escalating situations within the municipalities that we serve in, and help mitigate risk to the municipality should a particular situation result in civil litigation. We also serve as community ambassadors to visitors from outside of the municipality. What role does council play in bylaw enforcement? Council can direct the bylaw enforcement officer to conduct research and bring forth new bylaws to regulate activities within the municipality of Bayham for council's approval. Council can identify community problems that require attention and direct staff to prepare a council report related to the best way to address those problems. And council can direct the creation of policies or procedures related to overall bylaw enforcement operations. Council cannot directly involve themselves in an ongoing investigation or request specific information related to an ongoing investigation, as bylaw files are governed by the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Note, if a councillor were to become involved directly in a bylaw enforcement matter, they would become a subpoenable witness should the issue wind up in court at trial. Next steps, a comprehensive operational review is currently underway with special consideration given to the strategic goals and priorities for bylaw enforcement, public awareness and education, legal and financial risks, and operational efficiencies and cost recovery. That's all I have. Thank you very much for hearing me today.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Stephen, and welcome to the team. I'm going to ask if any member of council has any questions for Stephen at this time. Of course, Councillor Chilcott.
Just one, the note you made about counselors becoming involved in bylaw. We get calls all the time about people complaining about people breaking bylaws. In that case, what should we do?
I would refer to the municipal law enforcement policy and refer the individual to me directly, and then I can direct them as to the best approach as it relates to putting in a complaint, or I can provide information as it relates to the bylaw. I've done that several times already.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any other questions? Yes, Councillor Froese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How so? Email, text, you have a phone number?
Through the mayor, I do have a phone number. I don't have it currently, and I don't have it memorized. My apologies. It is available on the Municipality of Bayham website. I can also be reached at smiller@bayham.on.ca by email inquiry.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I see you have a report later on, so we'll see you again
I
shortly.
do. Thank you.
Moving on with section 7, adoption of the minutes of the previous meetings. If you wish. All right, then I'm going to need a mover and a seconder for the following. That the presentation from Stephen Miller, Bayham Malahide, bylaw enforcement officer regarding bylaw enforcement be received for information. Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Froese will move. Councillor Chilcott will second. All in favor? That's carried. Now we'll move on with adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting, which include the regular council meeting held July the 20th, 2023, and a statutory planning meeting held July the 20th, 2023. The meeting minutes have been circulated, and I assume everyone has had opportunity to peruse them. And if there are no errors or omissions noted, then I would look for a mover and seconder to adopt. Counselor Chilcott will move. Deputy Mayor Weiser will second the following. That the minutes from the regular council meeting held July the 20th, 2023, and the statutory planning meeting held July the 20th, 2023 be approved as presented. All in favor? That's carried. Brings us down to section 11, physical services, emergency services, 11.2, reports to council. We have report BL 0423 by Stephen Miller, bylaw enforcement officer regarding zoning bylaw enforcement policy. Welcome back, Stephen.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to members of council. One of my duties as bylaw enforcement officer is the enforcement of the municipality of Bayham zoning bylaw. Zoning enforcement files can vary in complexity and scope, but zoning enforcement is important as the zoning bylaw outlines zones with permitted uses, setbacks, lot coverages, and other acceptable forms of development in a given area. In recent months, the municipality of Bayham has been made aware of an increasing number of properties that are potentially in non-compliance with the municipality of Bayham zoning bylaw, making enforcement of the zoning bylaw a particular priority. In order to achieve a fair and consistent and effective enforcement approach, we are looking to create a policy for council approval, which provides direction related to the overall approach when properties have been identified as being non-compliant. Possible policy approaches are option one, a strict enforcement approach. This would be where the bylaw enforcement officer outlines the zoning issues on the property and seeks property owners to immediately cease activities or use of the property within the municipality of Bayham that do not comply with the provisions of the zoning bylaw. The property owner that could then go through the appropriate planning processes to rezone or to seek variance of the particular property. This is a preferred approach. This is keeping in mind that the properties that we're dealing with, if in fact identified as a non-compliant use, those properties are already in a position of non-compliance. And we are looking to bring those expeditiously to a resolution. Option number two is a mid-level approach. This would be where the bylaw enforcement officer provides information as it relates to the zoning contraventions on a property. And the request they cease the use or the non-compliant use and apply to rezone the lands. The bylaw enforcement officer provides a compliance date by which the property owner must elect one of the options. Following the compliance date, any continued activities or uses would not be permitted. And we would follow those up with the appropriate enforcement approach in accordance with the municipality of Bayham zoning bylaw enforcement policy. Option number three is a permissive approach. The bylaw enforcement officer provides information as it relates to zoning contraventions on a property, outlining options as it relates to compliance. The bylaw enforcement officer would provide a date by which the property owner is required to at least engage in one of those options listed and would be permitted to continue to use the property in contravention until such time as the appropriate planning processes had been exhausted. In consultation with the planning coordinator, we are recommending option one in order to reach expeditious resolution of files, as well as limit liability, as these matters are not authorized through the proper channels where land use conflicts may exist. Thank you. Subject to any questions you may have.
Thank you for that presentation, Stephen. I assume there will be some questions from members of council. Does anyone have a question for Stephen at this time? Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Stephen, for the report. I'm wondering, you had mentioned earlier that most of the non-compliance right now with these bylaw infractions are ongoing, and they are well aware that they are in non-compliance. Can you offer a estimated timeline as to how long this has been going on?
Not offhand, because I'm just touching on these files now, but the best sense that I get is that some of the non-compliance issues have been going on for quite some time. And to the owner's benefit. That's the best information I can provide at this time, but I could look into that and provide a follow-up later.
Any other questions before I dive in?
Mhm.
Counselor Chilcott.
Thank you. Looking at these two, that are these options, 1 and 2 are my preferred. But strict enforcement approach, is there any type of infringement that might need extra time rather than, I'm thinking like animals or something like that, where they would have to be rehomed, or where you would give them a period of time to do it?
So generally speaking, sorry, I would provide, it's in the municipal law enforcement policy to provide a period of time for compliance anyways, and to work with, especially where animals would be concerned, I would be receptive to a little bit longer timeframes. However, on more complex and frankly larger scale contraventions, the timeframes to go about the rezoning process could be years.
Thank you.
Stephen, thank you for that. I was going to actually go to you on that, or to the planning coordinator, if you could comment on some cases resolution or bringing some of these parcels or properties into compliance. What's the time frame looking at for, if it's a zoning infraction, have to bring these in compliance? You're not going to do this in a matter of 6 weeks. It could be a 6-month process, a year process.
Yes,
All right.
and I might add, through that time, under a more permissive policy direction, where the owner would reap the benefits of having that be a longer time span to reach that resolution.
Okay. In addition, I wonder if you might make a comment, or perhaps even the CAO, speak a little bit more about the liability exposure to the municipality, knowing that you're aware, municipality is aware of an ongoing non-compliance issue, and you're allowing this to proceed under, say, a more permissive enforcement environment.
Yes, so the risks of allowing a property to proceed with a non-compliant use are that if a potential court action were to result, the perception of the court could be that the municipality permitted it and was taken to allowing continued non-compliance for a significant amount of time. And that would make any potential court actions or to resolve or anything like that to resolve the file would make that significantly more difficult.
All right, say something were to adversely happen on, say, a non-compliant property. Because the municipality knew about it, permitted it to continue, would the municipality then face a higher liability exposure because of that action?
Yes, so in terms of liability, if there is something going on in a particular property, the municipality is aware of and is permitting, and there is something that's an accident or something that happens that results in liability or damage to property or adjacent properties, the municipality could potentially be liable for permitting that to continue.
All right, thank you. And I can go on a little more unless someone else has another question they'd like to ask. Yes, Council Froze.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With option 1, strict enforcement, where does that leave room to work alongside some of these? And I'm assuming some of these are small businesses that have started in a shop and a garage and maybe expanded to a little bit bigger. Then where does that leave them? Can we work alongside with them and bring them into, like, with a strict ironclad fist? It's not really a really good working relationship start, in my opinion. So I would lean towards option 3, as long as we could notify and then work alongside with to bring them on board and pay more taxes and mayhem.
Yes, and so I as the bylaw enforcement officer, my practice is to identify violations and provide a compliance date anyways with all files. It's just with the strict approach, as of the compliance date, they would be required to cease the activity. The risk, the risk of that is essentially allowing them to continue whilst knowing they're in a position of non-compliance, is tantamount to permission to continue that activity. And that opens the municipality to risk should a potential claim arise.
Councillor Pros.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What kind of risk?
Risk of liability for lawsuit, issues related to negative impact on adjacent properties and property values.
I guess one could argue, if we were driving around in Bayham, we've all seen them. So you could argue we were all aware of it anyway, right? So.
Through the mayor, the existing municipal law enforcement policy requires that a complaint be initiated before investigation, and I've read the policy, I'm following the policy, and we're talking about specifically complaint initiated type of things.
Does anyone wish? Tim, you're gonna have to unmute yourself, Councillor Emerson.
Sorry, I thought I, Mr. Mayor, that we have quite a few professional employees with the municipality and contractors, and this is an opportunity to bring these businesses, et cetera, in line and tax them appropriately. I mean, we can work real hard and shut them all down, and then how do we pay the wages for these people in the next year? This is an opportunity to actually capitalize and bring these people into good tax status and everything else, and ensure that we have revenue to pay all these things. I mean, if we go through and we correct every bylaw for a violation, then maybe in a year we don't need a bylaw officer. I just think there's an opportunity here to bring more revenue to the municipality and bring people online and with a less restrictive approach. I mean, there could be a lot of reasons why people didn't seek the planning. It's cumbersome, it's difficult, it's expensive. Somebody might have opened up a welding shop with all the money they had to, for example, to just buy the welding equipment. But if we let them, you never know. One of these guys might succeed and employ 10 or 12 people if we bring them on board. I think this restrictive approach is actually really quite regressive and not fruitful. That's my opinion on it.
Thank you for those comments. That's not what I heard from the bylaw enforcement officer. What I heard from the bylaw enforcement officers, where he would be establishing a bit of a time frame for compliance. And if it didn't happen, then they would be going into a more restrictive approach. Did I hear that correctly, Stephen?
Not with option one, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, through you, not with option one. It was like, come and get it done and get it over with. Option two was more permissive and easier to work with people.
Actually, I would disagree, but CAO has his hand up.
So,
Thomas?
through you, Mr. Mayor, to clarify, so the strict enforcement approach in option one would be once we've identified and have a complaint and can confirm that there is a use on the property that is not permitted, that use would have to cease all activities immediately and then work with the bylaw enforcement officer and municipal staff to gain compliance. And if that includes bring an application before council for an official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, or a minor variance, then that's what would have to happen. The reason why staff are considering and recommending option one first is the one that limits the municipality's liability the most. Option two is the one where the bylaw officer is a little bit more lenient and provides a compliance date. So for instance, a couple of weeks, whereas a landowner that is in non-compliance would have to choose an option. And at that time, until it is fully resolved, the use would have to cease. The third option is essentially option two, except the use can continue essentially in perpetuity until there's a resolution. And option three really doesn't give much incentive to a landowner to be expeditious when it comes to bringing an application forward. They can very much drag their feet. So the staff are very much in favor of option one because our duty with respect to the municipality's liability and finances is to limit that impact as much as possible. So that is the approach that staff have recommended.
I noticed that we are running a little short on time. We have a public meeting coming up, but if we can wrap this up in the next couple of minutes, I would encourage us to continue the discussion. Otherwise, we should break. But I'm wondering, and I'm looking to staff here, does anyone wish to make a comment on equitable treatment between those who are in compliance versus those who are not in compliance in terms of cost burdens from a tax perspective? What's it costing the average ratepayer out there from a residential perspective when you got a non-compliant property that isn't paying at their fair share? And I can't expect you to quantify it, but can you qualify it and speak to it?
So, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you, property taxation is an issue. And so where a use is not compliant, potentially a property owner could be getting a break in terms of the taxation. But taxation and assessments are done through MPAC, so it's important to kind of separate those pieces. But yes, there could be an incentive if you're operating an industrial business, let's say on a residentially zoned property. You're not, typically speaking, you would be not paying the appropriate level of taxation in the municipality.
So another would be a disequitable treatment between two like businesses, one that's in the commercial industrial zone, one that's in a residential or farm zone.
Correct.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
And
Just trying to illustrate.
Honestly, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's exactly what I'm saying. If we resolve these, then it would be equitable. It would absolutely be equitable. Give the guy a date to become in compliance and then have an amnesty for these businesses and then stop it after that. I just find this really regressive and punitive, and we're just going to drive business out of the municipality. That's how I feel. Which we have done in the past, actually.
Council, do you, I'm going to ask the question. Do you think we can wrap this up in 2 minutes, or shall we break and do our public meeting? All right, we're going to break. Let's hold or suspend this and move on to a public meeting. All right. Where do I find that? Everybody up? Okay, I'm going to call the statutory planning meeting to order at 7:33 PM. We are dealing with two issues this evening, two zoning bylaw amendments. I'm going to ask the panel or council for any disclosures of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. I see none noted. The first public meeting we're going to be dealing with is a zoning bylaw amendment, ZBA 0823, Blatts 12 Elizabeth Street. The purpose of this bylaw is amendment is to change the zoning regulations on a 1.2 hectare, 2.97 acre parcel of land to add an additional permitted use to one residential unit apartment and in a portion of an existing accessory building with floor area maximum of 51.7 square meters. That's 557 square feet in an existing mobile home park in zoning bylaw Z456, 2003. The subject lands are located at 12 Elizabeth Street, east side, south of Wellington Street in the village of Port Burwell. The effect of this bylaw will be to permit one apartment unit in the second story of an existing accessory building with an accessory storage on the lower floor of the existing accessory building. The proposed amendment is a resubmission of a previous zoning bylaw amendment, ZBA 18/22 proposal, which was refused based on neighbor concerns which have been addressed between the parties involved. At this point, I'm going to invite any public participation. Does anyone wish to speak to this file? If you do, please attend the podium and sign in. One more call. Anyone wishing to address this file publicly? This is your opportunity. Okay. I will note that there has been no correspondence received, and I'll confirm that with the Planning coordinator?
Through your worship to council. No accessory correspondence received. However, I will just advise council that there was correspondence included in the application at the time of submission. So that will be in the staff report when it comes back to council as part of the application.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
I note no other business before this public meeting. So we'll move for an adjournment. The motion would read that the zoning bylaw be considered at a future meeting of council and that pursuant to the Planning Act requirements, the public meeting or for zoning application ZBA 0823 is now complete at 7:36 PM. Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Deputy Mayor Weiser will move and Councillor Chilcott will second. All in favor? That's carried. So we'll move on with the second planning public meeting, and I will call this meeting to order at 7:37 PM. And I will ask for any disclosures of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. None noted. The purpose of this public meeting is to deal with proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment OPA 0523 and ZBA 0923, municipality of Bayham General. The purpose of these amendments is to amend several official plan sections in order to provide for consistency, conformity to recent provincial planning legislation changes, including section 4.7. Second dwelling units, additional residential units, permit up to 2 additional residential units, remove restrictions on additional residential units. Section 8.6.1.3, plan of subdivision. Public meeting requirement removed. Section 8.17, site plan control. 10 or less residential units would not require site plan approval. Section 8.18.1, cash in lieu of parkland, change of dedication rates. And changes to zoning bylaw, section 4.59, second dwelling units to replace second dwelling with additional dwelling. And to indicate maximum 2 additional dwelling units, no key map is provided as the proposed amendment applies to the entire municipality. The effect on these amendments will be to bring the municipality of Bayham official plan into consistency and conformity to the Planning Act as amended. This time I will invite any participation. So anyone who wishes to make a comment on these amendments, please attend the podium and sign in. One more call. Anyone wishing to participate publicly in this official plan amendment? Okay. Would note that public comments were received by August 10th, 2023, which includes Wendy Carmichael, August 10th, 2023 email. Any other correspondence?
Through your worship, there is none.
Thank you. I would note no other business.
Through your worship, I would ask just for a notation to be made.
Certainly.
Since the publishing of the agenda, I've had a further discussion with the planner.
Mhm.
The public notice that went out said a maximum of 2 additional residential units, whereas it should say up to 3 additional residential units in fully serviced settlement areas.
All right.
That's all part of Bill 23. This is a new as of right permission as a result of the Bill 23 Planning Act changes. Planner's opinion was that there was no need to republish the notice as it's as of right, which is not anything that we can change or argue with at that point. All we're going to do is be changing our land use planning documents to reflect that. So just a notation at this point, and then it will be coming to council with that notation in the amendments.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Brings us to the adjournment motion. That the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw be considered at a future meeting of council and that pursuant to the Planning Act requirements, the public meeting for official plan amendment OPA 0523 and zoning application ZBA 0923 is now complete at 7:40 PM. Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Counselor Froze will move, and I believe Counselor Chilcott will second. All in favor? And we're carried. That's carried. We will resume our regular schedule, and we left off at 11.2. The discussion on the bylaw, excuse me, it was bylaw enforcement policy. All right, anyone recall where we were? Wrong. Okay, we were in the middle of deciding which options we were going to consider. There were arguments being made all around for either 1, 2, or 3. And I guess we're getting closer. I expect we'll have some more comments. Counselor Froze.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I read the word enforcement, I'm wondering if we're putting the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart or whatever it is. In my term second term as counselor, there has been a residence within 3 kilometers of right here, and they have garbage piling up, and I've heard about it 2-3 times a year ever since I became a counselor. The police have been there. The previous bylaw officer has been there numerous times. When I read the word enforcement, I kind of wonder what we can do about it anyway, because this particular situation is clearly not within the bounds of the bylaw. Nothing's being done about it.
True, Counselor Froze. I would just make a comment that we're dealing with zoning bylaw infractions. And yes, you are correct. That's either a yard maintenance or a property standard, one or the other, but still, we're dealing with zoning bylaw. Okay? Compliance. So I'm sorry, but you got a valid point. We have
Enforcement is enforcement, though.
Yes, but we're looking for a policy on how to deal with zoning bylaw infractions. Or non-compliance. Let's call it non-compliance, because we're not going to call it an infraction at this point. Counselor Chilcott.
Thank you. Personally, I'm not. Well, I don't like the permissive approach because there's no end date for it. I would like the mid-level approach with a reasonable amount of time for the person to comply and work with the municipality in order to get the job done. I don't think a lot of people want to be going against the bylaw. It just happens that it's difficult to navigate. So perhaps with some help, they can do it.
Well, that's a matter of opinion, and I thank you for that. I'm not sure I agree. I will ask you though, what is the definition of a reasonable amount of time? I've already asked the bylaw and the
I think
planning
it's-
coordinator, what's it take to bring zoning into compliance? So does
it
that mean give them
depends,
6
right, on
months,
what
a
the-
year?
what the item is. Like, some things could be done within 2 weeks, some in 30 days, and
No,
some
they
in
can't.
6
We're
months.
talking about zoning compliance. And there's an application process and it takes time.
Okay.
Yes, sorry, Thomas.
No worries. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think if council is interested in a mid-level approach that would have a compliance date and is interested in the concept of what is reasonable in this regard, that can be a discussion had at the staff level between the bylaw enforcement officer and planning coordinator. As this would be a policy approved by council, a policy would then come back to council for consideration at that time. Council would have the opportunity to review what is being proposed by staff. Should council direct tonight to move forward with option 2, and would be able to provide more comment when the policy is drafted. So there will be more opportunity to comment before any policy is implemented.
Okay, thank you. And before I permit you to speak, I apologize if I came across as a little aggressive. I'm just trying to flesh this out. This is perhaps where we need to go. If you wanted to talk about a mid-level, then perhaps we do need to have an idea of what that may
All
be.
valid concerns, no problem.
Okay, sorry.
Um,
So Counselor Chilcott.
So I would like to move the mid-level approach and have staff come back with something that would be a reasonable length of time to have them comply.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Weiser.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm just gonna reiterate some of the process, just so that I make sure that I am on track. These zoning bylaw infractions that we are discussing are complaint-driven bylaw infractions. So the municipality has been made aware from a neighbor or someone in the public that there is improper land use going on. Am I on track so far? Am I doing good?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank,
And
someone's through you.
if I may add, these are properties, if non-compliance is determined on investigation,
Yeah.
these are properties that are already in a position of non-compliance. They have not complied or going through the appropriate planning process.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So my concern here is if we are not taking an enforcement approach, then we are actually admitting that we're aware, and like you said earlier, that's putting the municipality of Bayham at risk for liability, should there be any issues with that property and the improper use. So knowing how long it takes for planning applications and rezoning, I would be hesitant to go against anything that staff have put forward as a recommendation. I think option one is how we need to move forward to mitigate any risk and to get these people in the proper compliance so that they can continue doing what they're doing illegally and make sure they're doing it legally.
Perhaps may suggest non-conformance.
Not, thank you so much.
Don't use the word legal or
Legal.
illegal,
Okay,
please.
thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, Councillor Chilcott.
Thank you. I just need a clarification. I'm looking at this as today you get a call. Some neighbor is not doing what they should be doing. You go out there and you're gonna immediately have a cease and desist order basically on them for their problem. That's what I was looking at when I mentioned option two. You're saying that this is to clean up items that are already ongoing?
So through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. These are things that are brought to the municipality attention by complaint. Typically speaking, there are non-compliance issues that have been ongoing for some time, and they're coming to our attention by complaint through the municipal law enforcement policy. So yes, they are by complaint, and then we go out, and oftentimes it does take some time to conduct investigation. Zoning investigations are significantly more complex in terms of evidence gathering. And so it's not always super cut and dry whether there actually is a contravention or not. And I do, and I thank the planning coordinator for working with me already to help me navigate the municipality Bayham zoning bylaw. But it's not super cut and dry. So this would be only where a firm contravention, we've arrived at the property is in contravention.
Thank you for that answer, Stephen. Any other questions? Okay, Councillor Chilcott, you have already indicated that you would support a mid-level approach. Is that still your wish?
Yes.
All right. Have you got something? All right, then are we ready for the question at this point? Because gonna need a seconder. Okay, do you want the question first, or do you want to comment?
Just one more comment, if I may.
Councillor
please.
Froze, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
As long as part of staff's recommendation that is to come, right? I'm just curious how we're gonna address the whole enforcement issue then as well.
Yeah, you have a rebuttal for that, Stephen, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So this policy gives me as the bylaw enforcement officer, the necessary tools to undertake enforcement in a fair and consistent approach across municipality. That's what we're looking to do here, and to deal with things fairly and consistently and expeditiously, however council decides, whatever approach you choose.
Okay, are there any other comments and or questions?
Through you,
Councillor
Mr. Mayor.
Emerson,
Can we take maybe if we're gonna take a more, what I feel is a regressive stance on bylaw or zoning compliance, could we take a look at making it a little bit easier or expedite the zoning process in conjunction with it? Because a lot of this, I think, is because of, maybe education or whatever. It's just really hard to figure out what to do, and maybe in conjunction, we can make it easier to open a business here and easier to close one down that's not right. I don't know. I just think that whole thing should be reevaluated.
well, I hear you, Councillor Emerson. My first comment would be that zoning or planned use planning are public processes, and there are certain guidelines as set out within the legislation that we have to adhere to. So
Yeah,
it's going to take a number of days. That's just the
Yeah.
way it is.
It's not the days, it's the trying to figure it out. We could be give a little clearer and better direction to people when they're trying to go through the process, I feel.
Well, I believe there is a pre-consultation opportunity for people to attend and ask staff questions on moving forward. But I think what we're trying to address is an equity issue as well, an equality or treating people equally. And I think what staff are looking for is a policy direction. And I'm hearing that council would like to have staff come back and tell us what is a reasonable time. So am I correct, Thomas, that you're going to be coming back, telling us through a staff consideration, what's a reasonable time frame? Or are we going to be enacting a policy tonight and turning you loose?
Based on the recommendation in the report, Mr. Mayor, it's to bring a policy back. We just need an option to move forward with.
Thank you. There's your consideration. So are we good to take a look at it again? What a mid-level approach is? I'm seeing some nods. Okay. Would you read the motion, please, Megan?
That report BL 04/23 regarding zoning bylaw enforcement policy be received for information, and that a zoning bylaw enforcement policy be brought forward for council's consideration with the approach outlined in option 2 as contained within this report.
Okay, now it has been moved by Councillor Chilcott. Is anyone willing to second that? Councillor Froese. Okay. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. The longest report. Can you do this in the shortest time? Okay, then why don't we slip down to section 12 and get through some of the information correspondence items. We have a public drainage meeting coming up at 8 o'clock. All right. So slip down to 12.1.1 correspondence, development services to receive for information. We have item A, notice of public meeting regarding a proposed zoning bylaw amendment, ZBA 0823 Platts. And notice of public meeting regarding proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, OPA 0523 and ZBA 0923 municipality of Bayonne. I sure hope no one has any questions for this because we just went through those public meetings. So could I have a mover and seconder for the following, that items 12.1.1A and B be received for information? Deputy Mayor Weiser and Councillor Chilcott. All in favor? Any opposed? I think Councillor Emerson's frozen. We'll call that carried. I think we have time for one more. Report DR 0323 by Steve Adams, Manager of Public Works, Drainage Superintendent regarding petition for drainage, the Obar Kane. Good evening, Steve. Be a nice segue into our private or public meeting coming up.
Good evening, your worship, members of council. So yes, the petition before you was filed with the clerk July 25th by Dave Obar, Jessica Kane. Their property is situated at 11643 Plank Road, and the property requiring drainage is adjacent to that. 911 number, concession 9, lot 23. This is at the north end of the Village of Eden on the west side of the road. Under section 4 of the Drainage Act, petition was signed for a legal outlet in regards to future development. The property owners are currently working on a grading plan to satisfy the municipality, along with a second dwelling or a second lot severance to satisfy conditions as well. If council wishes to proceed with the petition, then we'll move on. If not, the petitioners have the option to appeal to the Ontario Tribunal. If council wishes to move this petition, staff would recommend recommending Spreets conducts as the municipal engineer for the drainage. If there's any questions going along with this, I'm here to answer.
Thank you very much for that report, Stephen. Does anyone have any questions for this petition? All right, then. We have a motion that reads that report DR 0323 regarding the petition for drainage for the David Obar and Jessica Kane be received. And that the council of the corporation and municipality of Bayham acknowledges the filing with the clerk of the petition for drainage works from David Obar and Jessica Kane. And that council wishes to proceed with this matter and appoints Spreet Associates Limited engineers to prepare a report on the proposed drainage area pursuant to section 5 and section 8.1 of the Drainage Act for council's consideration. Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Froese will move. Councillor Chilcott will second. All in favor? That's carried. Which brings, we're a little ahead. No, I don't believe we can. We have 2 minutes until we have a drainage public meeting, not enough time to jump in and do another report. So take a quick break and grab a coffee if you want. You got 2 minutes. Okay,
You're unmuted, your worship.
okay, welcome back. It is 8:01 and I will call this public meeting, this drainage meeting to order. And ask those in attendance for the drainage public meeting regarding the Hampton Drain improvements to sign in on the sheet provided. I assume you have it up there,
Yep.
Steve. While that is happening, I will ask any members of council for any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. I'm seeing none noted. Purpose of this public meeting is pursuant to chapter D17, section 41 of the Drainage Act. The purpose of the public meeting is to consider the proposed reconstruction of the drainage as outlined in the Hampton Municipal Drain Engineers Report number 220242 dated June the 5th, 2023, as prepared by Street Associates. And at this point, we will entertain a staff presentation. That would be report DR 0423 by Steve Adams, Manager of Public Works, Drainage Superintendent, regarding the Hampton drain improvements. Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you, your worship. So yes, this meeting, public meeting for the Hampton Drain Improvement Project is in consideration of the revised report. Just to bring everybody, it's been kind of a long period of time, so everybody's fresh. This was a petition signed by the president of Bonifield Farmlands in May of 2020. After many repairs throughout the system, staff, including the municipal engineers, did investigations and deemed that this drain is in this poor state of repair. So this drain was originally installed in 1969. As a recap, in 76, the engineer did an investigation at the time, and poor subbase was found. So this has kind of been an ongoing through the years. The last looking at the last 10 years of drainage bills and repairs, it has been ongoing. However, as you remember in our earlier meetings, that in the 2020, a pond was dug bigger, which went right through the municipal drain. And this was kind of addressed through the design and the assessments. So at the sitting of the quarter revision last year in September 15th, the landowner of 9 and 10 was willingly agreed to constructing a berm along the property boundary. This berm has been completed. It was completed this spring to staff and the municipal engineer's direction. And staff are happy with the work that was completed and are willing to sign off and move on. At this point, staff notified Spreets they can continue with the revision of the report, which was revised on June 5th, and this was filed with the clerk on July 24th. After the file, staff proceeded with notice of this public meeting for tonight at 8 p.m. To consider the report. So if council proceeds tonight with the report, obviously our next meeting would be the quarter revision as a tentative date of September 21st. So our municipal engineer, Mr. Spreet, is here tonight. He can present, he can talk about the the design of the report, bring everybody back in, possible changes that were made from the previous report. Just to remember to council and the public, tonight's meeting isn't about the assessment, it's about the design and design aspects. The quarter revision we can handle and talk a little bit more about the assessments. Further to this, I will ask John to come up, and then following John's, I guess we can, if there's public interest out there to speak, we're here to take the questions and answers.
Thank you, Steve. Well, welcome John to the podium.
Thank you, your worship. So as Steve said, tonight's meeting is the reconsideration of the Hampton drain. So as we just discussed, the top end of the watershed was altered. So we revised the drain. essentially following the same route as the existing drain, other than through the lands of the Bonifields and Schroen's lands, because that's where the pond was dug. But other than that, we're gonna be in the same location as the existing drain. Reducing the land area basically reduced the size of the tile, so it went down one tile size. So at the bottom end, we had a 24-inch. Now we have a 21-inch tile. So we're essentially the same drain, it's just a smaller tile because it's a smaller watershed. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does anyone from council have any questions for the engineer on this? Okay, yeah, let's revisit Councilor Chilcott.
Thank you. So reducing the tile OD reduces the cost or no?
Through your worship, yes, it did reduce the cost.
Thank you.
Seeing no more questions from council, I'm going to ask the public. Does anyone have any questions or wish to participate on the construction of the drain? Would you
Sure,
please come
no
on up to the
problem.
podium? Oh, can you get the sign-in sheet to her? No, we. Okay, John. Would you just speak into the mic and restate the question, because those who are virtual won't hear
Yeah,
what the question was.
can you hear me? Is this?
Yeah, we can
on?
hear you,
Okay.
but
All right.
those online.
The landowner just asked what the benefits are for their property, for the drain.
I guess it's within the.
Yeah, that's
within the
it's a
confines.
fair and valid
Fair
question. So,
Yep.
you know, under the Drainage Act, and that's what we're here tonight for, there's benefit and outlet assessment. So that under the Drainage Act, having the drain on your property, having the upstream water convey through a tile, so it's not a surface water that's running entirely off your property, that is considered a benefit under the Drainage Act. It's cool. Yeah, just that fact. Yeah, it's based on the length, in your cost, so you have, without getting too much into the assessments, your worship.
Right.
There's another meeting for that. If I go to the assessment page. Your property is assessed $20,000 in benefit, $5,372 in outlet. The longer the drain you have on the property, the more benefit you pay.
No, we're not getting any benefit, I only hose and a well. We're not even using it. We don't really care. We shouldn't say that. Yeah, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't really care.
We were told when it made, like, interrupted.
Right, we're talking about physical characteristics of the drain. We're not talking about the assessments or anything tonight. That's the future meeting coming.
That's the future.
The money ends the next.
Yeah, that's the future.
But this is the construction, like, is there any concerns with the construction of the drain or what's being proposed? That's what tonight's meeting is all about.
I would add that, you know, unfortunately, you're in the middle. You've got people upstream of you and downstream of you. And, you know, back in, I can't remember the date of the original drain, was it 68 or something like that? You know, there was a drain through there and your property was assessed. So it's, you know, that precedent's been set. The drain is an existing drain. Even if this drain didn't go ahead, you know, Steve would have an obligation to repair it and you would still have to pay costs, substantial costs for those repairs. Yeah.
Well, but I didn't. Yeah, but the bill was down. All of a sudden, they all did that. We didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's why we have this process. So, you know, now if there was repairs on it, Steve would come to your property and say that, you know, I want to go to your property and do some repairs, but yeah, there's a bylaw right now that has an assessment schedule and, you know, if there's repairs on it, you're liable for costs towards that. It's a very common practice throughout really most of Ontario.
Well, sign in and please. John, you'll have to translate.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
why now? When obviously the homeowners were also involved with that, didn't want it, the farm owners didn't want it anymore. Why now are those same properties of land involved in something that we would be able to do?
So
Actually, it's in the report, John, it says, it speaks to the upstream of Jackson Road.
yeah,
So I assume that's south of Jackson Line was
yeah,
decommissioned.
you're correct, your worship. I mean, I can show you on a plan better if you wanna pull it up or.
We don't have it, do we? Oh, do you?
She does.
Perfect.
I knew that. So if you look on this plan, you'll see that. I don't know if I should go away from the microphone because it probably won't be recorded, but. The top end of the drain, so you see Jackson Line. The drain originally went further south into the property south of Jackson Line. And that in 1982 was, the technical term is abandoned. You refer to it as decommissioned, but yeah. Yeah, but that only dealt with south of Jackson Line. Everything north of Jackson Line that crosses through the Bonneville lands, through the Johnson lands, crossed Mitchell Road, that was never abandoned. It's always been in place. So there's still a bylaw for that to this day. There is, to my knowledge, it's never been abandoned. It's still a municipal drain. Yeah, no, yeah, no problem. No problem.
Does anyone else from the public have any questions?
Well, so through your worship, this is an existing municipal drain, so the rules are that an affected landowner can sign. So in this case, Bonneville Farms owns land around there.
Yeah.
They exercise their right under what's called Section 78 of the Drainage Act to request an improvement to the drain because there's a long documented history of this drain not working. And there's farmland along the length of this drain that does go on.
Yep.
Yes, yeah, I have to. Actually, it's not even a choice. If they don't do it, if you sign a request and council decided not to do it, then you could simply go to what's called the Farm Products Tribunal. And they would say, okay, hire an engineer because the engineer can, do it. So absolutely. Absolutely. You would be able to do that request.
All would get benefit. There'd be
Yeah.
shared benefit.
Everybody gets benefit along with that.
Less.
Less,
Less water.
Less water
Less water.
because it's a bigger tile.
yeah, less water.
Yeah.
Okay,
No, I'm happy to answer any questions. Like that's.
Well, see, I was,
you'll have to sign in, Larry. Oh, you're getting? Okay,
no, the reason that I was concerned about it was when that new pond went in.
Yeah.
Big pond,
Yeah.
I was told by the previous owner that I was not to take as much as a cup of water up there. It's for this purpose and it's not on my land. We have never, I've never ever used that water for anything in my property.
Yeah, I
just got
that-
the truth.
I don't know what,
That's what he told. me.
That would-
They never used it.
that would.
Can we ask that question about why are they on the side? The other guys?
I would assume as identifiers.
To be honest with you, we take the latest name on the assessment roll and the assessment roll doesn't necessarily get updated the most quickly, so.
Excuse me.
So I don't know the history, to be honest with you. No.
That's it. Well, I just wanna say,
Oh, no, okay.
it does, don't, it does.
Yeah, I'm good.
If it pertains to the construction of the drain, Larry, if it pertains to the potential or the design of the drain,
It does.
okay.
And if you are able to come to the mic, that would be great.
It would be better if you could come up to the mic.
Just a quick question. Just a quick question.
Well, we are still trying to broadcast this virtually to those who are watching. That's why John's been translating the questions.
Sure.
So come on up and
Just talking.
please.
Hello? Okay. No, the reason I said that is when we all asked about that, you saw our paperwork.
Mhm.
What we did, we had this gentleman here call us to come down to explain it, and I want to thank him in front of you for the work that he did for us. Because it meant so much to us that we could sleep better and everything.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, he did a heck of a job, and I want him to be recognized for it.
Yep, absolutely. And thank you for your comments. Really appreciate that. Are there any other public questions on the proposed construction or design of the drain? Looks like we're done. Good. Correspondence, it's noted, the one piece of correspondence to the clerk on August the 15th, received from Larry and Faye Johnson and Linda Smith. And council has been circulated on that. So that's good. Which brings us to the disposition. And the motion would be that report DR 0423 regarding Hampton Drain Improvement Consideration Report be received for information. And that in accordance with sections 44 to 46 of the Drainage Act, the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Bayham hereby adopts Spreet Associates Report number 220242 dated June the 5th, 2023, referred to as the Hampton Drain Report. And that provisional bylaw number 2023-065 be given a first and second reading. And that the clerk be directed to distribute copies of the provisional bylaw and notice of the time and place of the first sitting of the Court of Revision to the affected parties pursuant to section 46(2) of the Drainage Act. And that a date of September the 21st, 2023 at 8 p.m. be set for the first sitting of the Court of Revision. Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Froese will move. Councillor Chilcott will second. All in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
So we pursuant to the Drainage Act requirements, the public meeting is now complete at 8:18 p.m. Mover and seconder? Councillor Froese, Deputy Mayor Weisler, all in favor? That's carried. Perfect. There. We are. Yeah, back. Yeah, gotta go back. All right, we've returned to our regular schedule, regular agenda. Oh, yes, the short report by Mr. Willison. PS 13-23 by Ed Willison, Manager of Capital Projects, Water and Wastewater Operations, regarding the MECP Consolidated Linear Infrastructure Environmental Compliance Approvals. It was an entertaining read, Mr. Willison. I look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you for that, Your Worship and members of council. The report that I'm bringing forward this evening is specifically related to the municipality of Bayham's Consolidated Linear Infrastructure Environmental Compliance Approvals as established by the Ministry of the Environment. This is specific when we talk about linear infrastructure, specific to sanitary collection systems and pumping stations, as well as stormwater conveyance systems. The MECP has recently restructured their approach to approvals of low-risk sanitary sewer and stormwater conveyance systems. It's important to recognize that this is just not for BAM. This is all across the province of Ontario. MECP approvals for wastewater treatment plants and water treatment plants remains unchanged. That stays with the approvals branch of MECP. Modernized approvals to municipal linear infrastructure includes pre-authorized conditions similar in scope to municipal drinking water systems. So it's important to maybe remember at this stage that drinking water systems, specifically distribution systems, have been under a very similar type of approval for many, many years. This is giving the authority to the local municipalities to expand their water distribution systems by way of formalized forms, prescribed forms by the Ministry of the Environment, and of course, a licensed engineer conducting the design and overseeing the works. So this newly downloaded approvals process is anticipated to reduce burden on municipalities, developers, as well as the MECP, while imposing a consistent set of conditions intended to improve environmental protection. The use of standardized system design, construction, and operations of municipal sanitary and storm systems is one of the Ontario government's key roles as this new approvals process moves forward. This is essentially empowering the local municipalities with the ability to approve and move projects that I mentioned in wastewater and in stormwater, expedite those processes. It's the province's approach that it will help expedite the building of new homes and eliminate red tape. Changes to the municipal role include the following: accountability and oversight. It's important to know that no change to existing requirements under other legislation such as the Planning Act has changed. Pre-authorization is limited to works that will become part of the municipally owned systems as identified within a development agreement. I mentioned earlier about the requirement of a professional engineer. The professional engineer is defined in the ECA, and the engineer must complete designs and sign off on the prescribed works. Work may be undertaken by other parties on behalf of the municipality. Municipalities must agree towards approving any changes to their system and must maintain records to ensure conditions of pre-authorization are being met. The municipal ECAs have an expiry date, and the process is a 5-year turnaround. All records related within that 5 years. As an example here, your worship and council, if there's works that are going to take place on a subdivision, for example, the municipality goes through the process and approves under this existing ECA. When the time comes for renewal in 5 years, the engineering records and engineering design and sign off by the municipality then goes to MECP. And then the next ECA that comes forward, the updated ECA, will include a listing of what's happened in the previous 5 years. The ECAs also have a component specific to operations and maintenance. Now, these type of ECAs specific to operations and maintenance we're familiar with, specifically with our wastewater treatment plant and our existing wastewater system. So in terms of, a new look to wastewater, a part of it is new, but a part of it we're already accustomed to. And that is our ECAs in wastewater already speak to operations and maintenance. We're looking at it. There are enhanced requirements, however, for monitoring system operations, inspections, and maintaining, as well as reporting. Now, upon review of these ECAs, we provide the following staff comments. The increased staff time will result in a need for increased operating budgets. And we're going to see that both in the wastewater department as well as in public works. However, that time may be able to be captured, and we may be able to consider recouping part of that expense through the development agreement process. There may be an increased workload as a result of prescribed operations and maintenance activities, including, as defined in the ECA, updating our asset identification, updating our asset management plans, which will be required for the renewal on that 5-year period. So as Public Works and Wastewater brings operational budgets forward in the coming years, we will be seeing increases related. It's the operations and maintenance of these systems will not be an option. There's also been some substantial concern specifically related to stormwater management facilities, specifically stormwater management ponds. stormwater management ponds have been around for years and years and years. Engineers have been designing stormwater conveyance systems with the stormwater management ponds to help alleviate or help take on excess water. So the stormwater management ponds as identified in the ECA have very detailed operations and maintenance, as well as inspection and monitoring. Staff believes that this will significantly financially expose the municipality as well as to liability. Monitoring and management plans will require qualified professionals, as the said ponds typically become an ecosystem that naturally support habitat for many species as well as unwanted vegetation. Further, the MECP's mandate in part is to protect Ontario's land and species at risk, including habitats. Aside from aquatic life, source water management ponds often become ecosystems that support a variety of vegetation and habitats, which may require ongoing monitoring and management of the stormwater management pond, which is going to be very onerous under this the ECA requirements. Specific to managing and operating these ponds, a part of that will be sediment management. So cleaning out at some point in time the pond. Sediment management is also a very detailed process specific to sampling and sampling of environmental contaminants, and if present, becomes very challenging to dispose of. So currently under the stormwater ECA, it consists really of the project being in Port Royal, the stormwater conveyance system along Robinson Street down to the beach, including a bioswale. The bioswale is identified in the ECA as a stormwater management facility, and it will have to be managed accordingly moving forward. And then the other section that's listed in our ECA currently is the other phase of the stormwater project in Port Royal being 1B, which is along Strawn Street and Hagerman brought to the outlet at the beach at Hagerman. No stormwater management there to deal with. So as we're moving forward, we do have one that we will have to consider, and we will deal with that as we're moving forward. However, with these concerns, council may want to consider prohibiting stormwater management ponds in future development proposals. One other note, your worship, is operations and maintenance manuals must be created and adhered to. And of course, the ECAs, like our wastewater treatment systems and our water systems, will be subject to annual MECP inspections. I am absolutely willing to take any questions, discuss any concerns. We are certainly navigating this together, and yeah, it's definitely going to be a new process.
Thank you very much for that report, Ed. It's a lot of detail to digest and for council to consider. And I know that you're looking for some kind of direction this evening. There's a question I have for you, and I'm wondering if it requires further cogitation on behalf of various department heads across the municipality. I understand the risk or the liability or the exposure, however you wish to characterize it, with stormwater management ponds. I get that. But how do you reconcile that with the desire of providing static or dry hydrant systems for fire suppression where we don't have water systems in the municipality? In other words, the municipality is looking to establish dry hydrants in various ponds. And with these new subdivisions which are proposed, for example, Sandytown or 1128 or wherever else, and it might incorporate a stormwater management pond, which is a source of water. So where's the trade-off? And that's something I'm wondering if we're prepared, not having that information tonight.
Through your worship, absolutely, I can understand where you're going with that. Typically, stormwater management ponds really aren't a consistent source of water for, in the fire department really typically doesn't rely solely on that. It's maybe a very small benefit that they may be able to tap into. And if a stormwater management pond can be tapped into by the fire department and there happens to be water in there, typically the amount of water that they're looking for, quickly they'll empty. The size of a stormwater management pond that we would probably see in the municipality of BAM wouldn't support much for water for fighting fires anyway.
Okay, thank you for those comments. The alternative to a stormwater management pond is some kind of an enclosed drainage system with an outlet somewhere.
Through your worship, this is correct. There's options of what's called like what a stormwater management pond, it takes on excess water. There's something that's called a super pipe. Super pipe is a very enlarged pipe that's underground. And it's used essentially just like a stormwater management pond, where it can fill slowly with excess water. But again, everything needs an outlet. So in the case of, as a stormwater management pond would have some sort of outlet ultimately. There could be options of petitioning for drainage, like we just heard in the public meeting, similar to that process. I just want to reiterate that I think council should carefully consider stormwater management ponds as we move forward. They may not be a problem immediately, but down the road, there is a process in place. There's some date specific things already. For example, we will have to do an inspection of our bioswale. We will have to identify everything in the bioswale. We will have to come up with a management plan within that bioswale, sampling, and as well, there's also a requirement in there now for signage. So there's a number of things that we're seeing that may be difficult to manage as we're moving forward. And I would hate to see us inherit by way of development something that could expose the municipality to environmental concerns.
Good, thank you for that. Thomas.
Just a quick point, and Ed, you can call me out if I'm wrong on this, but I was actually watching a council meeting of another municipality yesterday, and they were dealing with this exact topic, and the discussion they were having was about impacts to budget. And I think it would be very similar here as it was there, that with respect to some of these additional requirements that we have to have in place, it's likely that a lot of the budgetary implications are going to be at the front of this as we establish a lot of the operations and maintenance manuals, procedure documents, and which will likely involve some form of third-party engineering input. And then we'll have ongoing costs. But from a budgetary perspective, council should keep in mind that for 2024, there will be some impacts, and they will be greater in that first year than ongoing. So it's very much front-loaded. And am I fair in saying that?
Yes, absolutely. Through your worship, Thomas, nailed it. Certainly there are going to be some time-sensitive things. We are, if I could add, we are fortunate with the fact that we are specifically, again, like I mentioned on the wastewater treatment side of things, we have manuals that have, like the content of those manuals that have been inspected. We know essentially what MECP inspectors are looking for. It's now, building off of those potentially, but yes, I do foresee that there will be a requirement for our consulting engineers to assist us as we move forward.
Thank you for that answer. Does Councillor Chilcott?
Thank you. The current stormwater management ponds that we have, would we be somehow closing them up? I know there's one in Corinth, and I saw how it works. Okay.
Through your worship, Councillor Chilcott, the one that you're referring to there is not owned by the municipality. In this ECA that we're talking about right now, The municipality has only inherited stormwater or stormwater management ponds that were under a recent environmental certificate of approval by the province. So what you're referring to in Corinth or as I mentioned it, the only one that we currently under the ECA, currently the only one that the municipality owns is is the bioswale. Yeah, we don't own any others.
Mark, you've got something to add, please.
Through your worship, the discussion was about development, subdivision. We would like to see us get away from the stormwater management ponds. Stormwater management ponds are not fire ponds.
Yes.
Two different things. The options that the developer would have would be to install a cistern with a pump or a well with a pump. We could require them to be doing that to supply water for fire suppression.
All right.
This comes from a discussion with the fire chief where he would really like to see this happen because that would give a reliable source of water. Stormwater management ponds are not, as it's been said, are not a reliable source of water. They dry up in a drought. There's no water. But a consistent source, like I said, could be an installed cistern or a well. So I just wanted to add that for council's consideration.
Thank you. Thoughts? Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ed, for your report. There's under section 2.0 of the report, there's a duties of owner and operator authorities, and it says 2.1, the owner, prescribed persons, and any operating authority shall ensure the following, and then it continues on. I just wonder if you could clarify, because there's nowhere in the definitions, what is a prescribed person? And is that us?
Through your worship, to the deputy mayor, a prescribed person specifically for the purposes of the ECA is referring to a developer, or and that's in the case of a developer that's working on behalf of the private sector. We could also, a prescribed person could also be a contractor that's engaged by the municipality. And I could understand that is because I know that section does refer to some other provincial regulations, and that regulation made under the Environmental Protection Act and whatnot. So essentially, when we go through the approvals process, the municipality can approve a prescribed person, which is a developer under a development agreement, to conduct the works. And there will be an engineer also that will be, involved in the process. So hopefully that clears that one up.
Thank you. Just one quick supplementary.
Yes.
So for the purposes of the municipality of Bayham, we are the owners. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, this is
Okay.
correct. This is very similar to Waterworks.
Yes. Okay.
Waterworks has the standard of care and identifies in the regulations as the municipal owners. And in that standard of care, you have your prescribed duties. This is similar, very, very similar.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
And thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Just one final question. In the application, sorry, let me just get to the exact wording so that I know what I'm doing here. So issue date is May 24th of 2023, but application for ECA review date is November 15th, 2027. Is this the date that we have to have everything in place? Or I'm just trying to clarify what's review and what's our timeline?
Through your worship, again, to the deputy mayor, the MECP gives you a little bit of a window there leading up to your 5 years. Your expiry is at 5 years. So that is just a touch under the 5-year period, so that they can review. With this process, I think it's important to know this new and improved approvals process, that their approval staff I'm suggesting will significantly decline, because we'll be doing a lot of it in-house. So I imagine the first round of renewals might be a little bit tricky on their part, and as everyone's gonna navigate this, it's certainly gonna be a learning curve over the next number of years.
Okay. One more, Deputy Mayor?
One more, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. I just wonder, Ed, if you could speak to maybe alternate options that we would have for the stormwater ponds. Is there anything you would recommend as an alternate to that?
Through your worship, as we mentioned earlier, we talked about, potentially petitioning for drainage, like an outlet. All of the systems, the conveyance systems in, these proposed subdivisions that we're seeing, slowly moving forward. They're all going to need an outlet. There may be an opportunity, regardless, there's an outlet required. There may be an opportunity for, like, I'd mentioned this super pipe. That it's referred to, and it's a very large in-ground pipe. But again, it's just to take on capacity of water over, a 24 or 72 hour period that it can, drain, but again, an outlet will be required. Now, if I could, your worship, I think it's also very important to know that what we're talking about here this evening in terms of stormwater management is not, under the Municipal Drainage Act works. We're talking about things that are built under an ECA that are typically urbanized. When you're talking about the Drainage Act, rural, agricultural beneficiaries, they're really two different things. So I think it's important to know that we're talking about two different things here.
Thank you for that clarification. And yes, that was not even on the radar here. I was thinking, no, we're looking at development. I'm not, wasn't considering that as part of an agricultural drainage system, which might incorporate a runoff pond or something which is used for alternative purposes.
Right.
No, but thank you for that.
It's not, I mean, it's not uncommon to see ponds or storage containment units within a municipal drain. And those are not, those don't have to be managed in the same way that the Ministry of Environment is suggesting here for ECA type of stormwater management facilities.
Yeah. So essentially, in a nutshell, what I'm hearing is that staff are asking for basically authorization to consider alternatives to stormwater management ponds in future development applications.
This is correct.
Does that cause any concern for anybody? Okay, do you have wording, Megan? Because if not, I do.
I have something rough, but
Rough?
it depends on which way we want to go. I was sending through to Thomas. Sure.
We'll go with mine. All right. If there's no further discussion on this, then I have a proposed motion for somebody. That report PS 1323 regarding MECP Consolidated Linear Infrastructure Environmental Compliance Approvals be received for information. And that council consider alternatives to stormwater management ponds regarding future consideration of stormwater management facilities as components of development proposals. Deputy Mayor, would that suit your fancy?
Did that sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, did that include will that automatically bring a report back to council?
No, that won't require a report to come back to council. Basically, what it does is it's allows council the leeway when considering a development application to consider alternatives to stormwater management ponds. And that is something that, based on the information that Ed has provided, that staff will be doing anyways during the consultation process.
Okay, all right, I will move that, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
thank you. Anyone willing to second that? Counselor Chilcott? So all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ed.
You're welcome.
which moves us back down to section 12, development services, sustainability and conservation. And I believe we left off at section D. Pardon me. Report DS 47/23 by Margaret Underhill, Planning Coordinator, Deputy Clerk, regarding the rezoning application ZBA 0623 Gregory Underhill Farms Limited 55267 Orchard Line. Good evening, Margaret.
Good evening, your worship and council. So the report before you is to consider rezoning, and there's a draft bylaw provided. It's to satisfy a condition of consent for Gregory Underhill Farms Limited. The effect of the bylaw will be to facilitate the expansion of the Big Otter Marina and Campground as the lands subject to the consent application are being added to the Big Otter Marina Campground. So the zoning is to be consistent with the lands of which it will be added to. The public meeting was held July 20, no signed in attendees and no person spoke to the application, and there were no written public submissions. The planner's memorandum dated April 20th, accompanying the staff report DS 2723 dated May 4th, did provide an analysis of the application against the zoning bylaw. So the recommendation is that the requested amendment rezone the severed parcel from C3 and A2 to a site-specific C3-1 zone consistent to the Big Otter Marina and Campground. The area of question for the consent application and the zoning is to be used for storage for boats and trailers. It's not an expansion of the trailer sites. Staff and planner agree this rezoning application meets the policies and they recommend approval to change the zoning, and the recommendation is before you, your worship, for consideration.
Thank you for that report. Does anyone have any questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion before us that reads that report DS 4723 regarding the Gregory Underhill Farms Limited rezoning application ZBA 0623 be received for information. Excuse me. And that pursuant to Planning Act Regulations, Bill 73, Smart Growth for Our Communities Act 2015. It be pointed out that at the public participation meeting held July 20th, 2023, associated with this application, there were no written submissions and no oral presentation received regarding this matter, and that all considerations were taken into account in council's decision passing this resolution, and that zoning bylaw number Z456 2003 as amended be further amended by changing the zoning on a property located in concession 1 part lots 11 and 12, known municipally as a portion of 55267 Orchard Line, from the C3 and the A2 zone to a site-specific C3-1 zone consistent to the Big Otter Marina and Campground lot addition lands, and to specifically permit seasonal travel trailer park use on the severed lands in accordance with the official plan. And that zoning bylaw number Z 758/2023 be presented to council for enactment. Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Emerson. Councillor Froze. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item C, report DS 4823 by Margaret Underhill, Planning Coordinator, Deputy Clerk, regarding rezoning application ZBA 0723 Kravitz at 56858 Tunnel Line.
Thank you, your worship. The report before you is to consider a draft zoning bylaw to satisfy, again, a condition of consent. The effect of the bylaw is to recognize the residential nature of the newly created residential lot and prohibit new dwellings on the retained farm parcel in accordance to our official plan. And it, again, it's part of a consent condition for a land division application E104-22. Public meeting was held July 20th, no signed in attendees, no person speaking to the application, and no written public submissions. The planner's memorandum dated January 26th accompanied staff report DS 0823 dated February 2nd and provided an analysis of the consent application against the zoning bylaw. So the requested amendment will rezone the retained parcel, the farmlands, from A1A to special agriculture A2 to prohibit new dwellings, and rezone the severed parcel that contains the dwelling from A1A to rural residential zone, all in accordance with the official plan policies for surplus farm dwellings. Correspondence was received from LPRCA, Long Point Region Conservation Authority, in February stating they have no concerns with the proposal for severance and the proposed lot location. Staff and planner agree the rezoning application meets the policies and recommends approval to council to change the zoning with the recommendation enclosed in the report. And it's there for your consideration.
Thank you, Margaret. Does anyone have any questions regarding this rezoning application? Okay, seeing none, we have the following motion before us. That report DS 4823 regarding the Brian and Maria Kravitz rezoning application ZBA 0723 be received for information. And that pursuant to Planning Act Regulations Bill 73 Smart Growth for Our Communities Act 2015. It be pointed out that at the public participation meeting held July 20th, 2023, associated with this application, there were no written submissions and no oral presentations received regarding this matter, and that all considerations were taken into account in council's decision passing this resolution. And that zoning bylaw number Z 2003, as amended, be further amended by changing the zoning on a property located in concession 3 lot 23, known municipally as 56858 Tunnel Line, from agricultural A1 to special agricultural A2 on the retained lands, and from agricultural A1 zone to rural residential RR zone on the severed lands, to permit the severance of a surplus farm dwelling in accordance with official plan policies. And that zoning bylaw number Z 759/2023 be presented to council for enactment. Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Froze will move, Councillor Emerson will second. All in favor? And that is carried. Let's move on then with report DS 4923 by Margaret Underhill, Planning Coordinator, Deputy Clerk, regarding consent application E5323 Pettigrew 6423 Plank Road.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report before you is to consider a consent application to sever a parcel from a property located between Old Mill Line and fronted by Plank Road, within the boundary of the village of Vienna. The subject land is designated residential. There's portions of hazard lands, and they are zoned holding Village Residential 1, R1H2 on the Vienna map in our zoning bylaw. Elgin County Land Division Committee will consider the application on August the 23rd. So the planner's memorandum attached dated July 25th analyzes the application subject to our official plan and our zoning bylaw. Provided the severed lot connects to the municipal water and sewer services that are readily available on the frontage of the property, the proposed consent to create the dwelling lot is in conformity with the official plan section 4.5.2 residential uses in a village. Regarding the requirement to connect, Mr. Pettigrew did provide correspondence with the application requesting council waive the requirement to connect based on an agreement with the municipality executed in December 2000 by way of bylaw 2000-106. The agreement did identify that Casey Emerson Enterprises and the Pettigrews, being parties to the agreement, shall pay $46,500 to have the gravity-fed sanitary line extended north along the frontage of their respective properties. The agreement, however, does not speak to an exemption to connect. Since the agreement was executed in December 2000, the Vienna settlement boundary has been extended to a point slightly north of Light Line. The properties in question are now within the designated boundary of Vienna and subject to the policies requiring that any new development be required to connect to the full services available to Vienna properties. Rezoning to remove the holding H2 is required. That is included as a condition. Normally, H2 requires a subdivision agreement. However, in this case, for one lot, we're not looking for a subdivision agreement. However, they would have to connect to the services in order to remove the holding provision. Our standard conditions would include the rezoning, engineered stormwater management with drainage and grading plans for the severed lot, civic numbering signage for the retained land, survey, cash and lieu payment for the creation of a lot, and the planning report fee. To be determined, the subject land may be within a drain watershed requiring a reassessment of the maintenance schedule to add the new lot. Staff and municipal planner recommend the support of the consent application for the creation of a residential dwelling lot fronting on Plank Road in the village of Vienna with the recommended conditions. And the recommendation is before you for consideration.
Thank you, Mark, for that report. Does anyone on council have any questions for this consent application? Okay, seeing none, we have the following recommendation. That report DS 4923 regarding the consent application E5323 Pettigrew be received. And that council recommend to the Elgin County Land Division Committee that consent application E53-23 be granted subject to the following conditions and considerations. 1, connection of the existing dwelling to the municipal water service. 2, connection of the existing dwelling to the municipal sanitary service. 3, owner obtain zoning approval to remove the holding H2 symbol for the severed land. 4, the owner remove any and all structures from the retained lands to the satisfaction of the municipality. 5, engineered stormwater management drainage grading plan for the severed parcel to show that the neighboring lands will not be negatively impacted by surface runoff to the satisfaction of the municipality. 6, that the applicant initiate and assume, if required, all engineering costs associated with the preparation of a revised assessment schedule for a municipal drain in accordance with the Drainage Act, RSO 1990, as amended, with the deposit to be paid in full to the municipality prior to the condition being deemed fulfilled. If the deposit does not cover the cost of the revised assessment schedule, the applicant will be billed for any additional costs incurred. 7, payment of cash in lieu of parkland dedication fee as required in municipal bylaw number 2020-053. 8, provide a digital copy of the registered plan of survey of the subject land and includes in the drawing package the requirements from the Planning Act, section 5117. 9, payment of the planning report fee to the municipality. And 10, purchase of a civic number sign for the severed lot from the municipality. Hearing that, does anyone wish to move and second this motion? Councillor Chilcott will move. Councillor Froese will second. All in favor? And that's carried. Looks like Councillor Emerson's frozen again. He must be very cold where he is. We have one more under planning, so shall we get through to that one? Report DS 50-23 by Margaret Underhill, Planning Coordinator Deputy Clerk, regarding development agreement 7363 Coyle Road, minor variance A0623 Redsel. Marg?
Thank you, your worship. And before you and council is the report with the development agreement that follows the approval of a minor variance by the Committee of Adjustment. Mr. Redsell and Ms. Astbury applied for a minor variance to allow for the placement of 2 supplementary farm dwellings on their farm on Coyle Road. And they are looking to accommodate up to 4 year-round farm workers at their property to work on their farm and continue in day-to-day operations. The condition of the minor variance was to execute an agreement within 6 months of the minor variance approval. So here we are with the agreement before council to consider. The agreement includes a time period for occupations being year-round use, the time period for removal should the farm help no longer be required or needed, building and site maintenance, potable drinking water supply, septic services, building permits and inspection requirements. The attached agreement is presented for council's consideration.
Thank you for that report. Does anyone have any questions for staff? Okay. We have a proposed motion that reads a report DS 50-23 regarding the Redsel Asbury development agreement be received and that council authorize the execution of a development agreement between the municipality and Matthew Redsel and Dorothea Ashbury to permit the placement of 2 supplementary farm dwellings at 7363 Coyle Road, and that bylaw number 2023-060 be presented for enactment. Do I have a mover and seconder, please? Counselor Froze. Counselor Chilcott, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, it's a little after 9 o'clock. Does anyone wish to take a quick comfort break? We good? Good to move on, push on? All right, we're pushing on then. Brings us to section 13, finance and administration, 13.1 correspondence, and 13.11 to receive for information. There are a number of items here. If you wish, I will read them through. Otherwise, are there any questions regarding any of the correspondence or anything that anyone wants to draw attention to? Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. There's a number of these information items that we have already previously supported.
Yep.
But just bringing to attention, H, the town of Halton Hills regarding support for school bus stop arm cameras. This is something that we've supported in the past. I don't think we need to support it again. However, I just wanted to remind everyone that we won't be back in council until after school has started. So just another reminder that soon we will have buses on the road, and we just need to be well aware and keep our children safe. And hopefully we will have some information about these stop arm cameras soon. Just a comment on that one.
All right, thank you for that. Does anyone have any other item? That's interesting. I wondered if, given what we're experiencing across the province, if someone might have been interested in item D. The town of Fort Erie controls on Airbnb, Verbo, and others which affected municipal rentals. Essentially, the correspondence is looking for the government to establish a regulatory framework for digital platforms such as Airbnb. It's up to you, council, whether you want to support that or not, or just take note of it. Counselor Chilcott.
Yes, I did look at that item and I was wondering how that would work out when we don't have our own policy in mind.
I know.
But I think that if we ever were to put in a policy, it would be nice to have some kind of structure to go by and some type of governing agent. So I would like to promote that as well.
Support the
Support it. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Okay. Any other item while we're in consideration here? Everybody's good? I know I'm trying to push the agenda along. It's getting late. Okay, seeing none, then if I would take a crack at this, it would be that items 13.1(1)(a) through N be received for information. And that the corporation of the municipality of Bayham would support item D, the town of Fort Erie regarding controls of Airbnb, Verbo, and others which affect municipal rentals. Does that sound about right? You got that one? So I think Councillor Chilcott, you'd be willing to move that?
I would.
Okay, have we got anyone who'd be willing to second that? Councillor Froze? All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none? That's carried. Thank you. 13.1.2, requiring action, Linda Phillips, Kelm regarding Jackson Line traffic. Anyone wish to speak to this?
Mr. Mayor, I'll briefly speak to this.
Thank you.
In the absence of the manager of public works. So correspondence came to us by way of Councillor Froze. The resident is inquiring about high-speed car traffic on Jackson Line and whether or not council would entertain a 60 km/h speed sign posted near the no exit sign. We do have a policy that works through Steve for this. It's our speed limit assessment policy. And that is where staff would recommend that we begin on this one. So we'd recommend that With respect to this piece of correspondence, it would be referred to the manager of public works under the speed limit assessment policy for review and consideration.
So what's council feel about that? Is that reasonable approach?
I'll move that.
Okay. We have I guess I'll read the motion that corresponds from Linda Phillips Kelm regarding Jackson Line traffic be received for information, and that
That the matter be referred back to staff under the speed limit assessment policy for review and consideration.
so we have a mover, Counselor Froese, Counselor Chilcott will second. All in favor of that? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Item B, John and Donna Wilkinson regarding dangerous driving on Plank Road, Eden. Thomas?
Just quick comments on this one, Mr. Mayor, through you. So the correspondence stemmed from a conversation between the commenter and the clerk on the matter. It appears that similar to other complaints we've had, there is speeding concern in Eden. As Plank Road is a county road, we can't refer it through our own speed limit assessment policy. And in this particular matter, we would refer the correspondence to Elgin County for consideration and also to the OPP detachment.
Sounds reasonable. Any questions or concerns? All right. The motion would read that the correspondence from John and Donna Wilkinson regarding dangerous driving on Plank Road, Eden be received for information. And that staff be directed to forward this correspondence to the County of Elgin and the Ontario Provincial Police. Mover and seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Weiser and Councillor Chilcott will second. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 13.2 reports to council. We have report TR 1323 by Lauren James, Treasurer, regarding the Q2 variance report for 2023. Good evening, Lauren.
Good evening, your worship, members of council. Everyone can hear me okay, right?
Yep.
Okay. Before you is the second quarter Q2 report. This report is similar in style to the previous one you received in Q1, as well as the Q4. One item for council, just to remind council, this time last year, we did a $2 million GIC. That GIC has now come up for renewal. So there is a request further down in the report. Give you some high level discussion points on the operating side. Operating are in level expectations of expenses given some of the higher inflationary pressures we're under, both in operations, as well as some lower revenues in some functional areas. The capital pressures at this point have been less than anticipated due to projects coming to date under budget. So that's been exceptionally well. At this time, we do have an excess amount of cash on hand. A lot of people think, what does excess cash mean? Basically, it's cash relating to the GICs of the $2 million that came renewed in July, as well as cash from fixed rate use operations such as water, wastewater. So this is just rollover cash to improve the yield on interest in the short term. I'm available for any questions of council or if council has any follow-ups.
Thank you for that report, Lauren. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Chilcott, please.
Thank you. Lauren, when you say cash on hand, that cash on hand is already allocated elsewhere to reserves and that it's just invested so we can make money on it while it's.
Through the mayor to Councillor Chilcott, that is correct. Council reminded that in the Q4 report of 2022, the year-end reserve balances for each of the reserve accounts, both reserves, restricted reserves, and deferred revenue was presented. This just relates to the $2 million from the previous year rolling over and just improving the yield on those reserves in assessments. So instead of having the LAS, we're using high yield GIC investments through RBC.
Thank you for that. All right, Lauren, can you remind council again what quantum you're looking to invest at this time?
we are looking for direction for 1.5 million on a 1-year GIC. And at the time of writing this report, I was able to confirm 5.52%, but since then I've been able to come back with RBC and secure interest bearing at 5.75.
Okay, 5.75. All right. So, what's your pleasure, council? If I read the motion? Unless there are other questions, did you have another question or anything, Councilor Emerson, are you good? Okay. That staff report TR 1323 regarding the 2023 Q2 variance report be received for information. This is why I changed my voice.
Might need some help on this one, but let's see if this makes sense, and that staff be directed to invest 1.5 million on a 1-year GIC with RBC at a 5.75% interest.
Correct.
Perfect.
Okay, do we have a mover and seconder? Counselor Chilcott will move, Deputy Mayor Weiser will second, all in favor. Okay, that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Lauren. Item B, report CL 0923 by Megan Elliott, clerk, regarding the curbside bulk garbage pickup program policy. Megan, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to council. At the June 15th regular meeting of council, you received report PS 11/23, which was the update from the bulk item curbside pickup for spring of this year. At that time, council resolved to establish the program at more of a permanent position at $25 per pickup and to have staff provide a policy for consideration. So attached to the report is a policy to consider, and the direction would be to present this for enactment this evening.
Thank you for that. Does anyone have any questions, concerns? You've read the policy? Okay. The motion would be that the report CL 0923 regarding the curbside bulk garbage pickup program policy be received for information, and that the appropriate bylaw be brought forward to adopt the policy as presented. Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Chilcott will move, Councillor Rose will second. All in favor? That's carried.
Add one more thing. Sorry, Your Worship.
Too late now.
Just more for the public, if you,
All right,
if that's
then.
okay. So in this policy, it outlines that to register, it will be through our online forms on our website. This is being built right now through IT, so I will be able to have this posted on the website shortly. So the first pickup will then be for September 18th, I believe, the third Monday during that week. So we will have that registration up probably in the next couple weeks.
Thank you for that. I would also add that the policy also states that should the public need assistance, that staff are willing to assist and with that online process.
That's correct.
In other words, those who aren't tech savvy, you're not going to be left out. We don't leave anyone behind. Thank you. Report CAO 4323 by Thomas Thayer, CAO, regarding contract extension, Ontario Provincial Police Elgin Group Policing Services Agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through you to council, council has received over the last 2 years, 2 of these requests previously. They have generally come forward by way of correspondence from the Elgin County Police Services Group, seeking an extension of the existing contract. The hope was by this point in time, the new community, the CPSA, Community Policing and Safety Act, would be enforced in effect, and we'd have our new board order for our Police Services Board. Unfortunately, this hasn't happened yet, which necessitates consideration of an extension of the existing agreement. In discussion with the county interim CAO and other applicable lower tier CAOs, we are all amenable to considering a 2-year extension. The bylaw to authorize same is on the agenda tonight. And my understanding is that a couple of municipalities have already passed and approved this with bylaws being provided to the county. So to continue with the existing police services for the interim until the new act comes into force and effect. Staff are recommending consideration of a extension for a 2-year period and approval of the appropriate authorizing bylaw. Mr. Mayor, I will leave it with you and council for deliberation.
Thank you for that report, Thomas. Does anyone have any questions for staff? Essentially, it's status quo until the new act is in place. Okay, all right. The motion would be that report CAO 4323 regarding contract extension, Ontario Provincial Police, Elgin Group Policing Services Agreement be received for information. And that the council of the corporation of the municipality of Bayham agrees to extend the existing Elgin Group Policing Services Agreement with the Ontario Provincial Police, OPP, for a further 2-year period ending December 31st, 2025. And that the appropriate authorizing bylaw be brought forward for council's consideration. Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Deputy Mayor Weisler. And seconded by Councillor Chilcott, all in favor? That's carried. Item D, report CAO 4423 by Thomas Thayer. CAO regarding the update of Bayham building and planning fees. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, once more. So this report comes forward as the culmination of previous council direction provided in September of 2022. At the time, council would have received a report regarding a shared review of building and planning fees ongoing with the Township of Malahide to support at that time consideration of a shared service arrangement for planning, building, and bylaw. Council directed that we work with the Township of Malahide on this matter, and the report that is attached to my staff report is essentially the culmination of this review. The general uptake from the report is that there are some recommended increases to building fees, and there are some larger recommended increases to planning fees. And the planning fees are further substantiated by a discussion that Mark and I had yesterday with IBI Group regarding general planning fees in Bayham compared to other municipalities of similar contexts. And it was agreed that our planning fees are quite a bit lower than other areas, so much so that corroborates information in the report that we are very much subsidizing development applications and development by not moving more towards a cost recovery model. The cost recovery model is important because council has identified it as part of their 2023 to 2026 community strategic plan as an initiative that is of interest to council, moving services more towards cost recovery. The report outlines building services and planning services over the last few years based upon historic budget actuals. Generally speaking, building services does run a bit of a surplus, which helps us to support building services in the case of a service or revenue downturn, and support renewal of capital and provision of overhead. We are seeing an impact in building this year, and it was alluded to a little bit in the treasurer reports. When it comes to functional areas that we are seeing a revenue hit, we are seeing it particularly in building this year. We are down approximately a swing of $52,000 to the negative between revenues and costs. Costs are comparable to where we should be, but revenues are substantially down. So the shift is generally due to inflationary pressures and reactive interest rate increases. We are working with a couple of developers right now on subdivision agreements, and hopefully we'll have those in a position of finalization sooner rather than later. But generally speaking, other permits haven't come online like we had projected them to. Some of the harmonized fee structures that are being proposed and recommended by the consultant are identified at pages 21 through 26 of the report for building, and also provide some examples of how fees would impact specific types of building permits. Generally speaking, the greater impacts are for those buildings of a larger size, because the inflator value per unit is recommended to be increased, and the increase is generally meant to harmonize with the municipality or the township of Malahide. The report also, this report also identifies, and the consultant report identifies that even though we are in a shared service arrangement, that it is appropriate for BAM to continue to fund a building reserve to recession-proof the function. And this is because we will be contributing towards capital replacements in the future with respect to any vehicles that Malahide uses to provide us with service. With respect to development services historically runs a deficit, and council over the last couple of years has shifted its general thinking on the notion of levy subsidized growth, and has sought to implement development charges to water, wastewater, and now is considering development charges for other functions. The same logic follows that we should be looking to move more towards cost recovery for applications. Right now, we are subsidizing the application process quite substantially year over year, and that is continuing through 2023 thus far. Recommended fees are included on page 15 of the consultant report. They vary depending on the complexity of the application. These fees took into account the amount of staff effort, consultant effort, and general administrative overhead that went into a variety of different applications over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. This data was provided to the consultant by the planning department. And it is meant to identify at a cost recovery level what the municipality expends in cost to address and process planning applications. A fee that is proposed in the report and that we are supportive of, that we do not currently charge for, is a mandatory pre-consultation for planning applications. And that would be at a cost of approximately $100, which would be something that would account for staff time and consultant time to do a pre-consult of any applications coming forward. So with that, I'm going to leave it with you, Mr. Mayor, and council to deliberate. The intent of the report is to give us an idea of where council wishes these fees to be for the 2024 calendar year. This information with respect to building will be provided to Cloud Permit in support of the creation of our Cloud Permit environment going forward for e-permitting purposes. It will also provide us with building and planning fees to then come back to council with a comprehensive rates and fees bylaw update. The rates and fees bylaw has been something that has been an ongoing discussion point with staff over the course of the last number of months, and has not been updated since 2020, I believe. So there is certainly opportunity to look at increasing fees in certain functional areas, and building and planning are two of those functional areas that should be considered. So again, Mr. Mayor, I will leave it with you and council for deliberation and any direction you wish to provide, and then we will bring back a comprehensive rates and fees bylaw at a later date.
Thank you for that. Any questions from council members for staff? It's like they must agree with you. Would you please read the motion?
That report CAO-44/23 regarding update of Bayham building and planning fees be received for information, and that council approve the recommended planning and building fees as presented in the consultant's report, and that a comprehensive rates and fees bylaw inclusive of the updated building and planning fees be presented to council for consideration.
Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Councilor Froze. Anyone willing to second? Deputy Mayor Weiser. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Councilor Emerson's froze, so if he was opposed, he could chime in. Okay, report CAO 4523 by Thomas Thayer, CAO regarding shared services, Malahide request to withdraw from a planning services provision.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the request comes forward from the Township of Malahide, and essentially this stems from the general inability of the municipalities to recruit a director of development services. The director of development services was meant to be the quote unquote consultant that the municipality would utilize as a local registered professional planning resource. And would allow us to slowly shift our reliance on consultants towards a more local resource that is staffed by an adjacent municipality. Unfortunately, we have been through multiple recruitment processes, multiple interview processes, and have been unable to formally retain this position. In light of the above, myself and my counterpart at Malahide had discussed on numerous occasions the best direction to move forward in this regard, recognizing that senior planning positions these days are at a premium, and recruitment over the last 6 months has not been fruitful. Malahide Council at their last meeting considered this matter, and they have requested that we consider absolving them of their requirements under the existing memorandum of understanding and providing correspondence in that regard. Now, this does not mean that in the future we can't then reconsider. It would likely require them to provide us with correspondence that they'd like to reconsider and reintroduce those components. But doing it by way of correspondence that absolves Malahide of their responsibilities for this position, it means that we don't have to amend the memorandum of understanding. We simply provide correspondence to them in regard, and we hold the correspondence for our own files. And we can continue to move forward with shared building and shared bylaw, which are now active and have been for the past 7 or 8 weeks. So, Mr. Mayor, I will leave it with you and council for discussion, but we would be looking for a motion that would permit their withdrawal and that would recognize that building and bylaw will continue in force and effect, and that correspondence to Malahide shall be provided under my signature.
All right, thank you for that report. Does anyone have any comment, questions, concerns? Councilor Pros.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what if I agree with the first part, but not the second?
What is this? What is the second part?
To continue the shared services with building and bylaw.
Well, we are deliberating planning right now. It is more to make clear that we are not considering at this point in time removal of the services or cessation of the services for building and bylaw services. Now, if council ultimately wants to consider that, that is a completely different matter, because we have just gone through the interview process for a building inspector for both municipalities. We have just appointed the CBO for both municipalities, including consultant services. And we have just onboarded a bylaw officer to provide bylaw enforcement and paralegal services to both municipalities. If council ultimately wants to do that, it is a 6-month cool down period, so it wouldn't actually lapse for 6 months, but that is absolutely up to council. Right now, I can advise that we have received a lot of feedback, positive feedback from the bylaw side of things, and we are getting cloud permit up and running and are getting our feet under us for building. And the only concern at this point in time is obviously planning, because we haven't been able to bring in the staff resources to execute it, which is why it's before council right now.
Okay,
I guess I'll clarify my question. I get the first part that you presented, and I'm in favor of that. I just didn't understand why the second part was added to it. I would just assume it was a given that it would continue.
It's just for clarification. I mean, we're considering that withdrawal of planning services. I don't want the message to get muddled that we're, potentially considering at this time withdrawal of other services. I just wanted to make it clear that the other 2 services are still in force and effect.
Okay, any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, again, this doesn't preclude a future full service agreement. It's simply the pauses has to be hit on the director of planning position at this point. So the motion reads that report CAO 4523 regarding shared services. Malahide request to withdraw from planning services provisions be received for information. And that the council of the corporation of the municipality of BAM agrees to permit withdrawal or to permit. No, you can have some more articles in there. Permit the withdrawal of the township of Malahide from the planning services provisions in the shared services memorandum of understanding adopted by bylaw number 2023-003, and that the building and bylaw services components of the MOU shall be deemed to remain in force and effect, and that the correspondence be provided to the township of Malahide under the chief administrative officer's signature. Now, I apologize for that. I just added an article onto it. It read easier for me.
Personal preference.
Okay. Mover and seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Weiser. Counselor Chilcott, all in favor. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Report CAO 4623 by Thomas Thayer, CAO regarding quit claim of municipal interest, registered plan 4, Vienna, 55106 Vienna line.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a bit of an interesting one, and I also have the planning coordinator here because she, in my absence earlier this month, was handling this with our real estate solicitor. So the background for this one is council is aware that report DS 3323 came to council earlier this year, contemplating OPA number 33 for Lancaster Farms. The report would propose a site-specific OPA to permit severance of an existing farm dwelling made surplus through farm consolidation that didn't conform with the OP policy. Now, after municipal council supported and recommended to county council, the applicant had moved forward with seeking out a survey on the lands for the preparation of the consent application. And when that was done, it was identified that there was an existing art plan on the property that they were unaware of, and when it was brought to the municipality's attention that we were unaware of. So when we were provided a copy of this, we actually found it very interesting. The art plan attached, this art plan dates back to 1926. So it's a 97-year-old art plan that for very, very old art plan that for whatever reason does not show up in land titles. The reason it's being brought before council is because the road allowance and the lots that were proposed have not been developed. We were unaware there even existed out there in a plan of this nature. And based upon the current settlement boundaries and official plan policies, development of these lots and the roadway would not conform with our current official plan policies, as the majority of the development lies outside the settlement limits of Vienna. In discussion with staff, there is no interest in developing or assuming another roadway, as we already have more than enough to maintain. And my understanding is the applicant has no interest in moving forward with development in this in any way because they have their own plans with respect to their land. So they are looking for us to essentially approve and move forward with a quick claim of any interest. Municipality's perspective in this art plan, generally speaking, that applies to the roadway because they have no interest in the lots. This is something that can be done from an administrative perspective, so it doesn't require council direction to move forward. Rather, it's being provided for information purposes. So council is aware of what the municipal staff are doing. So it is before council as an information report. And after such time as it is formally received by council, then staff will move forward with our real estate solicitor to quit claim our interest because it does not conform with development patterns that we are willing to encourage at this time.
Thank you for the report, Thomas. Does anyone have any questions? Just another one of those oddities that creeps in from time to time. Okay. The motion would read that report CAO 4623 regarding the quit claim of municipal interest, registered plan 4, Vienna 55106 Vienna line be received for information. Mover and seconder, Deputy Mayor Weiser. Counselor Chilcott. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Brings us to item G, CAO 4723 by Thomas Thayer, CAO regarding cost estimate, restoration of the Port Burwell Lighthouse. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So before I get into this one, the treasurer is also still on the line in case there are some financial questions, but we are going to try to refer much of this discussion to the 2024 and 2033 capital budget deliberations. Essentially, the background to this one is that we allocated $125,000 to the facilities reserve to support lighthouse rehabilitation works in 2022. Some of the findings from various assessments over the course of the last year have identified market structural concerns at the lighthouse that have necessitated temporary stabilization measures. Those stabilization measures were awarded in, I believe, in March, and we also have an agreement in place with the adjacent landowner to utilize the land for stabilization and for works in support of the lighthouse. Now, what I can say is stabilization is done. The stabilization has come in about 5% under budget, which is wonderful news. However, the main rationale for bringing this report forward is that we now have a cost estimate for what a comprehensive restoration of the lighthouse looks like. We were hoping it was going to come in somewhere in the area of $750,000. Unfortunately, it is twice that. The estimate is attached to the report and summarized in the report to the tune of $1.53 million. Just for council's information, that we are effectively responsible for 1.76% as an HST rate, and we are able to recoup about 80% of the 13% HST, which is another $27,000 on top. As a reminder, the lighthouse is considered a non-core capital asset. It is considered this way because it is not critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure is generally road, water, wastewater, stormwater. And generally, when we look at funding any sort of non-core, we look for other funding mechanisms such as grant opportunities, any sort of support from upper levels of government. We don't normally look at fully levy or reserve supporting or utilizing debt in this regard. Based upon discussions with the treasurer at current interest rates, if we didn't have the Ojibwa debt, we'd be looking at about $17 million in overall debt capacity for borrowing purposes for projects. And a discussion with staff, we know that we've applied for a DMAF program that is going to require a certain amount of debt if we are successful, which essentially means that once we pay off the Ojibwa, we're turning that into debt for the next few phases of the Port Burwell stormwater system. That leaves us somewhere in the area of $13 or $14 million in debt. And we also know, based on an upcoming condition assessment of the Port Burwell secondary, which is still yet to be received, that there is going to be a substantial municipal requirement for rehabilitation of a 7-kilometer stretch of that secondary transmission line, which, based upon a previous report from the manager of capital projects, it's likely going to be somewhere in the area of 11 to possibly 13 million. So that is the balance of the debt capacity. Recognizing that these are core works, whereas a lighthouse is non-core. We would recommend against any consideration of debt for the lighthouse and its rehabilitation. However, it is identified in the funding option as an option should council wish to go that route. Ultimately, council is responsible for directing staff with respect to finance. However, any use of debt or any repurpose of existing reserves would possibly impact council's desired initiative to pay off the remainder of the Ojibwa debt in March of 2025. Another component for financial purposes or grant applications. Generally speaking, grant applications for non-core are lesser than those for core because of the nature of the infrastructure. We do regularly apply for grants for both types of programs, capital and operating. We are aware of at least one grant program that exists through Parks Canada as a cost-sharing program for historic sites. But some of the challenges with respect to this program are twofold in that the maximum funding is up to $250,000. And the municipality upon application would have to identify and confirm the availability and nature of the remaining funds. So in this case, we'd have to know where the extra 1.25 million is coming from, and we don't have that at this time. Unless we're utilizing debt for non-core, which historically hasn't been something that councils wanted to consider. Ultimately, it's likely some combination of the above, even though we would recommend against debt. And we've also received some inquiries from members of the public about how fundraising may go. This is a viable component similar to the approximately $100,000 that the SHF raised in support of the Canada 150 grant for rehabilitation of the Strathmore Community Center. However, this would be something led by the community rather than by the municipality. And we would, if once council determines in what year and how they want to fund this project, then we'd have a better idea of what the outstanding funds are. Based on the above and to ensure that this item is discussed in the context of the draft capital budget as a whole, we're bringing it forward now as we do put out our draft budget at the end of August. So it's approximately 2 weeks out. And we wanted to make the cost public so it's not a shock to council or the public when it's included. We are currently considering it in the 10-year capital plan in 2025 as an item fully funded by grants. However, based upon the estimated cost, this may be too early and realistically improbable given some of the other cost pressures the municipality is going to have over the next couple of years. So the information is before council. I've included as a part of it a couple of the aspects of the strat plan that apply to the lighthouse and this report. The proposal from A-Link is attached as well. Whenever we do go forward with this project, it would go through the comprehensive open tendering process for the work. So we'd be working with either them or another heritage consultant to prepare the tender and the contracting documents. We're simply providing this for transparency purposes and to put it out in the public prior to the publication of the budget. And we'd ask that any further in-depth discussion from council regarding the restoration of the lighthouse be referred to the 2024-2023 capital budget special meeting, which is currently scheduled for October the 3rd, 2023. So Mr. Mayor, I will leave it with you for you and council for deliberation and comment. And the treasurer is also online if there are any financial questions, but I would recommend ultimately that the discussion itself be referred to the capital meeting.
Well, thank you for that report, and it is a little sobering, to say the least. Shocking. I think it's wise that it's be already identified and published for the 2024 capital budget discussions on October 3rd. I think it's prudent that the messaging is out there now. It's public, transparent. I think this is going to take more than just the municipality to do. Honest to God, I think this is going to be a public-private partnership if we're going to pull this one off. So it's going to need a lot of thinking, strategizing on how we can actually accomplish this together as a community. So I think between now and October, it gives a lot of opportunity for individuals to put their heads together, so to speak, come up with a plan. How are we going to do this? How can we conceivably do this? And we'll be in a better position to, I think, make that decision in October, how we can do this, if we can do this. Is that fair to say? We're not going to accomplish it tonight. It's a big ask for a ratepayer. No, it's a big ask for all of us. But we have to recognize that it is part of the cultural identity of the municipality. Okay. Deputy Mayor, you're wearing a pin where it's right there. It's right there in the stained glass. So it's something that, it's gotta give them some serious consideration. Okay? Does anyone have any questions or comments for staff at this point?
I do.
Counselor Emerson, please.
Just one obvious comment that I know anybody that's watching is gonna be saying to themselves, so I might as well say it out loud. When we talked about the Stratfordville Hall, it was clearly said by staff that we were in a position to fully fund the project and it wouldn't hurt us. And now when we start talking about the lighthouse, we're in dire circumstances. I just find there's such a contrast when we're talking about these two issues. It doesn't seem congruent or consistent with comments when you talk about Stratfordville. I'm just saying out loud.
Unfortunately, you cut out halfway through there, Counselor Emerson, but I think we got the main thrust of your comment, okay? Yeah. I'm not sure it's fair, and it's unfortunate that that's the perception that's out there. Does anybody have anything else to offer at this point? Or shall we take the advice, move this forward for the
Well, okay,
October
assistant
special-
from meeting to meeting.
I missed that, Counselor. I'm sorry.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Does anyone have anything else to offer from council? Okay. Then the motion would read that report CAO 4723 regarding cost estimate restoration of the Port Burwell Lighthouse be received for information. And that discussion regarding the restoration of the Port Burwell Lighthouse be referred to the 2024-2033 capital budget special meeting scheduled for October 3rd, 2023. I need a mover and seconder. Councillor Chilcott will move. Anyone interested in seconding? Deputy Mayor Weisler. All in favor of that motion? And that is carried. Thank you. Brings us to the bylaws. We have 8 bylaws. A bylaw 2023-060, bylaw to authorize the execution of a development agreement between Matthew Redsoul and Dorothea Ashbury and the Corporation Municipality of Bayham. 2023-061, bylaw for the use, protection, and regulation of public parks and recreation areas in the municipality of Bayham. Bylaw 2023-062, bylaw to amend 2023-053, a bylaw to appoint municipal officers and employees for the municipality of Bayham. Bylaw 2023-063, a bylaw to adopt the curbside bulk garbage pickup program policy. Bylaw number 2023-064, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute an amending agreement with His Majesty the King in right of Ontario as represented by the Solicitor General for the provision of police services for the Elgin Group municipalities. Bylaw number 2023-065, being a provisional bylaw to provide for drainage works in the municipality of Bayham in the county of Elgin, known as the Hampton Municipal Drain Improvements. Bylaw number Z 758 2023, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number Z 456 2003 as amended, Gregory Underhill Farms Limited. Bylaw number Z 759 2023, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number Z 456 2003 as amended, Crevets. Does anyone have any issue or anything they wish to discuss about the bylaws? Okay, I do. I would like to see 2023-061 sent back to staff for a bit of a rewrite, specifically section 2.11 vehicles and parking. I think it's a little restrictive. I think when you consider that though the bylaw at the towards the end or does not prohibit the use of emergency services or municipal services in parkland. But there are occasions where there will be vehicles looking to use and enter that parkland. Car rallies. Okay, the car in the park, or even Watermelon Fest where they may actually have cars lined up all across the back of the park. And this bylaw, the way I read it, is a little restrictive and prohibits that. So I think a clause in there, something to the idea that unless expressly authorized by municipality, you know, these uses will be prohibited unless authorized. Something simple. And then in 2.1.16, posting notices. Whereas it's prohibiting notices being posted on municipal property. Well, we've got some notices right now, public or posted down there at the beach on the screen in front of the washroom. And it's simply to thank the contributors to the recent Beach Fest. Now, they're not long-term. And maybe again, this is something that's subject to approval of the municipality. Something for consideration. So if it's appropriate, I would like staff to take a look at that, or are these simple enough amendments you can accommodate tonight?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, without having the bylaw officer present, I would recommend it be referred back to staff and then we can bring it back in September.
All right, I don't think it's pressing to have it done right now.
It's not pressing, but we would like to have it back in front of council for approval. So then we can move forward with short form wording, through the ministry. So, we'd like to have it in force and effect for January the 1st, and the quicker that we can get it back to council for approval, the more helpful it'll be. So,
Okay.
we'd refer it back to staff specifically to, reconsider section 2.1.1, and we'll do that should council vote for us to do so.
All right. That's my recommendation, council. And I guess I'm going to have to ask whether council is willing to entertain that. I'm getting a nod from Councilor Froze. Just a straw vote, because we will go through and we will adopt the other bylaws, and unless you, I think I've got an idea how to do this. Okay, you got that? All right. Have you got a motion for us?
That bylaw number 2023-061 be referred back to staff for amendments to section 2.1.1 and 2.1.16. That bylaw number 2023-065 be given a first and second reading, and that bylaw numbers 2023-060, 2023-062, 2023-063, 2023-064, Z758-2023, and Z759-2023 be ready first, second, and third time and finally passed.
If that's acceptable, if I have a mover and seconder, Deputy Mayor Weiser. Councilor Froze, all in favor? Thank you. Moving on with 16, other business, we have the minutes of the Waterfront Advisory Committee meeting held July the 17th. And we have the minutes of the Museum Advisory Committee meeting held July the 19th, 2023. Does anyone have any questions regarding the minutes? Councilor Chilcott.
Thank you. The Waterfront Advisory minutes, excuse me, mentioned that they wanted yearly control of the bioswales or maintenance of the bioswales.
Information.
That is on the next recommendation, Councilor
Oh,
Chilcott.
sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. I was just wondering if that met up with what we were just talking about.
Nope, we're
tonight.
dealing with the minutes first and then the recommendations from the committee.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on the minutes? If not, the motion would be that the draft minutes from the Waterfront Advisory Committee meeting held July 17th, 2023, and the draft minutes from the Museum Advisory Committee meeting held July the 19th, 2023 be received for information. Mover and seconder, Deputy Mayor Weiser and Councilor Chilcott, all in favor? Carried. So recommendations to council from the Waterfront Advisory Committee. Do you wish to speak to that, Thomas, please?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll speak to the Waterfront Advisory Committee. So there are 3 recommendations that came out of the July 17th meeting. The first is for consideration of a line item on the operating budget regarding annual bioswale maintenance. And an information report prior to the 2024 operating budget discussions on the history of the bioswale maintenance. I have already discussed this with staff. We have no concerns about the recommendation, and we would support these as part of the budget discussions or as a preempt to the budget discussions. The committee also identified that they believe that no further consideration of a community barbecue location at the beach would be the way to move forward with this due to various concerns noted. Staff are also in favor of this recommendation. And there was a consideration, a recommendation to council about a playground to be included in the 10-year capital budget discussions at the East Beach. At this time, we would not be in favor of that. However, it is before council for consideration if council wishes it to be referred to the capital budget discussion. So Mr. Mayor, we'll leave it with you and council to consider.
Okay, thank you for that. Any comments? Now, Councillor Chilcott.
I was just wondering if the maintenance of the bioswale would fall under what sure Ed was speaking about earlier today with the storm management ponds, because the bioswale is a storm management.
Thomas will address that one.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So the recommendation was for a report on the history of bioswale maintenance, not the implications of bioswale maintenance going forward. I would expect that if council refers the line item regarding annual bioswale maintenance to the operating budget, it would be part of that discussion.
Got that wrong then.
Okay. Are we considering all three of those particular recommendations in that report, Thomas?
Yeah, so all three recommendations are considered as part of one item. So if council wishes to move forward with any of those, then council may do so by motion. Similar to what council did with a previous, there were about, I believe, 5 recommendations that came forward from the final meeting of the Blue Flag Committee last year, and council chose to recommend further information come forward on 2 of those.
Right.
So it could be something similar if council isn't interested in moving forward with the playground at the East Beach at this time. So
Okay.
we'll leave it with council.
I recall receiving a report from Chief Barnick regarding a lot that the second recommendation regarding barbecue locations and on the beach that came forward, and it was sent back to the committee for review and consideration. I have no problems with someone wanting to include a discussion on the capital budget for playground equipment. Personally, I don't think it's a good location for it, but if you want to have a discussion at the budget time, we can do that. And in terms of the bioswale maintenance, yeah, I have no problem with that discussion at the budget time either. So it's up to council, whatever your pleasure is. So first, receive for information, and which items do you want to see move forward to budget? I would almost recommend we can talk about the bioswale maintenance and perhaps if you want to talk about the playground. We already have decided that more or less. I don't think there's any interest in pursuing barbecues at the beach. Do we have a policy? But we don't have that enacted yet, do we? The bylaw on prohibiting barbecues.
That's correct. That is the bylaw that is being referred back to staff for
Right.
consideration.
Yes. Okay. All right. Oh, sorry, Councillor
Sorry.
Chilcott, it's getting late.
I'm still kind of confused about the bioswale. The second line says, and that Water Advisory Committee recommends to council that a line item regarding bioswale maintenance be referred to the 2024 operating budget. My question was, is this the same type of thing that would be what
Yep.
Ed was speaking of earlier, and would that go towards that end?
It would, based upon the information provided by Ed that we are now aware of, the line item would include a discussion and some high-level costing about what it would take from the municipality's perspective to maintain those bioswales in accordance with MECP policy. So we didn't have this information when the Waterfront Advisory Committee held their meeting. This is something that has come to the fore since that time.
Right, I understand that. I just wondered if they were the same.
Yes.
fall under the same
Yes,
thing.
they will be captured under the same general discussion. From a beach and blue flag perspective versus the MECP regulated approach to stormwater facility maintenance.
Thank you.
Oh, that cleared up.
There's mud.
Okay, perfect. Did it clear up for you, Madam Clerk? Perfect. Let's have it. Unless there's further discussion, let's have the resolution.
So we have that the recommendations to council from the Waterfront Advisory Committee be received for information, and that staff be directed to report to council with an informational report on the history of bioswale maintenance before the operating budget deliberations, and that a line item regarding annual bioswale maintenance be referred to the 2024 operating budget discussions. It
Now,
depends on if you want to
did you-
speak to anything else.
Did you tell me that the barbecue issue is being referred back to staff? Does it have to be directed at this motion?
No, so you're talking about the,
Waterfront Advisory Committee,
yes,
this was here.
the barbecue? No, so the original report that came forward was about prohibition of various items at the beach.
Correct.
Council's discussion at the time was to refer the discussion about the community barbecue location to the Waterfront Advisory Committee for input.
Right.
They have since provided that input. So there is no other action to be taken at this time because they have recommended that
Right.
there's no further consideration from their side of things. Now, what council can do as part of the motion is accept the recommendation for no further consideration of a community barbecue location.
I think that would close it. So I think that should be included, if you would, Madam Clerk. And then the last one. What do you want to do about what are your recommendations? Would close the issue on the playground.
Are you looking for some wording from myself or
I
the
would
clerk?
say so.
Depends on what council wants to do. Does council want to include it in the budget discussion or does council not want to include it in the budget discussion?
Do you not want to?
Is that the consensus? Okay. I'm kind of, Counselor Emerson, do you want to include playground equipment on the budget discussion?
I would like to, your worship.
Makes no difference. We can have that discussion at that time. I'm not in favor of it, but we can have it.
We need discussion to include it as a capital item. So-
Yes, that's what I mean. So if you want the discussion on a capital item sheet, I need to have I've got one. What's the rest of council thinking? Deputy,
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Could you clarify with that? If that discussion were to happen, it would include projected costing?
Yes, it would come forward as a capital item sheet, similar to the way that the VCP improvements and the canoe launch were handled last year.
Okay. Let's have the discussion.
okay. We'll have a discussion, but like I say, I don't think it's a good location personally, but that's my bias.
Yep.
All right. Just added some more words for you. Absolutely. Ready?
Might need some help on the last one when you're talking about the sheets, Thomas, so I can add in the barbecue. Okay. So reread, receive for information and the staff be directed to report to council with informational report on the history of bioswale maintenance before the operating budget deliberations. And that a line item regarding annual bioswale maintenance be referred to the 2024 operating budget discussions. And that council accepts the Waterfront Advisory Committee recommendation for no further considerations on a community barbecue at the beach. And that staff be directed to,
I would say, and that further discussion regarding a playground at the Port Burwell East Beach be referred to the 2024-2033 capital budget special meeting.
Perfect. Mover and seconder, please. Okay, Deputy Mayor Weisler will move. Counselor Chilcott will second. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to the recommendations from the Museum Advisory Committee.
Through your worship, I'll tackle this one. Museum Advisory Committee met on July 19th and they had two recommendations from their discussions. The first recommendation speaks to the capital item FA07 Marine Museum accessible washroom and entrance. They are recommending that council consider imposing a completion of works deadline of April 30th, 2024 during your capital budget deliberations for this project. As well, through the discussion on capital items and upcoming projects, the curator was discussing a lifeboat that is located outside in the parking lot that they want to move indoors. So there's potential recommendation to council to have staff be directed to report to council on what the expenses for moving the lifeboat into the museum will be for possible capital budget consideration, depending on cost threshold and process involved. It could trigger into capital instead of operating. The second topic and recommendation surrounds the lighthouse and funding initiatives. The recommendation is to have staff be directed to investigate and report to council on how fundraising efforts for restoration of the lighthouse can take place. Again, this was prior to Mr. Thayer's report tonight on the lighthouse, which touched on the fact that that would ideally be from community driven and not through the municipality. So there may not be a need for a full report, but that's up to you. And those are the recommendations to consider.
Okay. One question for you, Mark. I believe it's 2025 is the requirement for full accessibility on public buildings. Why the deadline of April 30th? Other than the fact that it's prior to the opening for the season.
I believe that's the reason. I wasn't present for it, but that would make logical sense that it wouldn't interfere with the tourist season for the Marine Museum. Based upon preliminary discussions with Manager of Public Works, I mean, the accessible washroom and entrance would have to get engineered. There's a process there.
Yeah.
We have to apply for the proper permits to do the work because it is changes to structure. We'd have to full on go out for tendering and award and then construction of work. Unless that is something that starts in the next couple of weeks, I don't think that timeline is reasonable. And Steve is here. I see him nodding over there. So I think we're in agreement that the April deadline is likely too quick. And this is probably going to impact the Marine Museum operations next year. But unfortunately, under AODA and the requirement to have, these public facing buildings accessible by Jan 1, 2025, we've got to do what we've got to do. So it's sort of just what it is at this point, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all right. I don't want to interfere with the operations of the museum, but at the same time, if we're going to go around and petition for federal accessible grants or something, that's going to play through too. I'm just, curious if perhaps that's something council wants to accept. A hard deadline of April 30th, or if you're willing to play out through the 2024 year in order to get there. I'm trying to look for flexibility. Councillor Chilcott.
Is it possible, once the museum closes in the fall, to be able to get that work done by December 31st?
That's the next question.
Because we don't want to impact the open times of the museum. We prefer to have it done sooner rather than later, but if it can't be done, it can't be done, but we need to try and work around the working hours at the museum.
That would be something that staff would have to discuss. We'd have to have a deeper discussion on timelines with, an engineer and prospective contractor on what the scope of work and the duration of work would be in a reasonable situation. I would recommend to council that any further discussion regarding accessible washrooms and entrance at the Marine Museum be referred to the capital budget discussion, so staff can have more information for council in that regard.
Yeah. All right.
Yep.
I think that's a reasonable approach. Okay. All right, Counselor Chilcott.
One other thing that was mentioned is the moving of the lifeboat into the building to prevent it from further destruction.
Okay.
The
All right.
weather is starting to deteriorate. It needs to be fixed, and the thought was she has a plan for a display that you can put it in and put things around it and use the lifeboat as kind of a background type thing. Bringing it inside, there is a garage door. And if it's done at the same time approximately as the washrooms, everything will already be moved out to make room for the washrooms being built.
I see.
And then they can pull the lifeboat in if that works out. So the timing of the two
I
will
see.
kind of be
Okay.
together.
All right.
Hmm.
That makes some sense.
Makes sense.
All right. Okay, again, is this something that would have to be in consultation with the capital budget then? Okay. Suggested. Yeah. And then the final, I'm not sure there's any. I certainly appreciate the Marines Museum on lighthouse funding, but I think those are going to be hot topics for the next little while anyway, between us and the community.
Again, this was done before the report that came out today, but I'm sure that the entire community of BAM is looking to find out what they can do and how soon they can start, because they want to get started the sooner than later, because it's a huge ask, more
It
so
is.
now than we thought it was gonna be. So the sooner we can get a handle on the fundraising efforts that can be done, the better.
Got a sense?
Yeah, I think with respect to that, I'm recognizing that the capital budget discussion around the lighthouse will be very interesting, to say the least, and I suspect we might have some more information about what potential grants might be coming out over the course of the next year or so, after the mayor and I meet with the MP in a couple of weeks to discuss upcoming ventures and needs. I would refer this to the capital budget discussion as well. It's likely something where we're gonna have just a comprehensive discussion of the lighthouse, and I expect some good information to come out of that, so I would refer to the budget.
Okay. Madam Clerk, have you got something that
I think I just needed a little bit of clarity when we were talking about the washroom, because that's already in the capital budget. So if we're not imposing a date, is that just fine as is, or we still have to put language?
I would suggest that any further discussion about a completion of works deadline be referred to the capital budget discussion on item FA 07.
I'd like for a record, I want the committee to understand that I understand the reasoning behind the pushing for the deadline. I get it. Okay, but I think let's move to the capital budget and have that discussion. Staff will have more information for us.
Okay, let's see if this makes sense. That the recommendations to council from the Museum Advisory Committee be received for information, and that any further discussion about completion of works deadline for capital item FA 07 be referred to capital budget discussions, and that staff be directed to report to council on what the expenses for moving the lifeboat into the museum will be for possible capital budget consideration, and that any discussions on fundraising efforts for the Port Burwell Lighthouse be part of the capital budget deliberations.
I'm
Thomas?
thinking just from an operational and efficiency perspective, why don't we just include the expenses for moving the lifeboat into the museum as, say, it's gonna be part of the capital budget discussion, rather than having to bring it to council only to bring it back to council?
Right.
We have a meeting coming up where we're discussing the Marine Museum. Let's combine it as one item, do everything at once and save staff some time because staff are quite busy.
The report or what you'll be bringing back will give us a type of timeline, like not dates, but 3 months, 4 months, however long it takes. Will that be something you'll be bringing
For which item?
for the discussion? Sure.
The washroom.
For the washrooms? Yes.
I think the piece of the lifeboat or the mindset of bringing a report forward was to then see if it triggered to be capital or not. So should I just not specify capital or operating and just say budget deliberations?
You can say applicable budget deliberations.
Yeah, I'm having trouble seeing how moving it would coincide with the capital budget deliberation.
It is more likely going to be operating, but it's
Yes.
going to be an operating expense that likely gets incurred at the same time as, we're doing the accessible washroom and entrance, so.
Right.
We'll take a look and we'll include it as part of the, the applicable budget discussion.
On that, and that staff be directed to include expenses for moving the lifeboat into the museum to the applicable budget discussions.
Okay. Who's happy with the recommendation? You need it all again?
Yeah,
That's
sorry,
late enough,
sorry, Megan.
We need a repeat.
That the recommendations to council from the Museum Advisory Committee be received for information, and that any further discussion about completion of works deadline for capital item FA 07 be referred to the capital budget discussions, and that staff be directed to include expenses for moving the lifeboat into the museum to the applicable budget. Maybe I say just applicable budget. And that any discussions on fundraising efforts for the Port Borough Lighthouse be part of the capital budget deliberations.
All right. Mover and seconder, please. Counselor Chilcott, Deputy Mayor Weisler, all in favor? That's carried, which brings us to the confirming bylaw. That confirming bylaw number 2023-066 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. I need a mover and seconder, please. Counselor Chilcott, Deputy Mayor Weisler, all in favor? Which brings us to the Dan Froese adjournment motion. That's moved by Dan Counselor Froese, seconded by Counselor Chilcott at council meeting be adjourned at 10:18 PM.
Did he win?
Yes. All in favor? That's carried. Good night, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. We had a lot of material that we went over, but we certainly appreciated your indulgence.